10,000 Races Illustrated Handbook. Rank, F. I stood in the middle of what had, about 4 seconds earlier, been my school's playground, and I read those 2 letters hanging in the air in front of my face. Rank F. The lowest grade a human talent can possibly awaken at. The bottom of the barrel, the participation trophy of the apocalypse. In a world where your talent decides whether you live past 20, I had just pulled the one they hand out as a consolation prize. And behind me, 300 of my beloved classmates completely lost it. You have to understand the setup to enjoy this properly. My name is Lin Tao. For 18 years, I had been the kid everyone quietly hated. Tallest in the year, top of every exam, perfect scores in the fitness trials, the face teachers used in the recruitment posters, the golden boy, the one the other parents pointed at during dinner to make their own kids feel bad. Nobody says it to your face, but you feel it. 300 people spending 300 small resentments on you every single day, waiting for the universe to finally knock you down a peg. Well, the universe delivered, in front of everybody, rank F. Somebody near the back actually laughed out loud. The perfect Lin Tao awakened trash, and then the dam broke and they all piled on, because that is what people do. F rank. The all-rounder is a garbage rank. 18 years of showing off for this? One girl was laughing so hard she had to hold on to her friend. Honestly, fair. If I'd spent a decade jealous of someone and then watched them draw the worst possible hand at the worst possible moment, I'd laugh too. I'm not a monster. Here's the thing they couldn't see though. I wasn't looking at the rank. I was looking at what came under it. Because most talents, when you awaken them, show you one line. The name, the grade, done. Mine showed me one line and then kept going. 3 more entries scrolled out beneath it, faint and gold, the kind of extra detail that, according to every textbook I'd ever been forced to memorize, only appears on A+ talents and above, an F-rank talent, with A+ formatting. So while everyone was busy writing my obituary, I was standing very still, reading very fast, thinking one extremely calm thought. Nobody move, I need to understand what just landed in my lap. Let me back the truck up about 90 seconds because you're missing the good part. 1,000 years ago, the sky broke. That's not poetry. A tower the size of a mountain fell out of nowhere into the Pacific Ocean. An entire neighboring kingdom got erased by the wave, and then the doors of that tower opened, and every race you've ever heard of in a myth and about 400 you haven't came pouring out to take our planet away from us. Dragons, phoenixes, things with too many eyes. They renamed our world the Ancestral Star like we were tenants who'd overstayed. Humanity went from 8 billion to under 1 in about a generation. We are officially race number 1098 out of the ranking. Near the bottom, a vassal species. The clan that technically owns our deed is a bunch of giant turtles, and I will get to the turtles, believe me. The only reason we're not extinct is the tower itself. Once a year it reaches down, scoops up every kid who's come of age, and drops them inside for a novice trial. A week in a survival dungeon to awaken a talent, and if the tower feels generous, come out stronger. Most kids come out, not all. My homeroom teacher had just finished giving us the send-off speech, the one about the 9 great human-era masters across the whole millennium, 9 in 1,000 years, 1 every century or so, if we're lucky, the single human strong enough to make the other races flinch, and he'd looked right at us and said, "This century's era master is due. It could be one of you." And then he'd said the thing he says every year, quieter. "Come back safe, within a week, all of you." And the moonlight had poured down like water and swallowed the entire playground, and here we all were, standing in the awakening chamber, finding out what we were made of. My best friend Wei Zhen went in a different chamber. Round as a beach ball, allergic to exercise, and the most loyal human being I have ever met. His entire life ambition was, and I quote, "not to be an era master, that sounds exhausting, but to be the guy who stands slightly behind the era master and holds his stuff." I told him he was aiming low. He told me low was where the snacks were. I missed him already. And my mother is F rank, same as the letter now hanging in front of my face. She goes into the adult trials every year because that's the law, and every year for 1 week I don't know if she's coming home, and every year she walks back through the door a little thinner and says, I'm fine, did you eat?" And I have spent my whole childhood learning the exact sound the lock makes when she turns her key, because that sound means I get to keep her for another year. That is what F rank means to me. It isn't a grade, it's the number of days my mom has left, counted out 1 trial at a time. So no. I wasn't laughing along with the schoolyard. I was reading my 3 impossible gold lines, and I was thinking, whatever you are, please, please be enough. The tower answered by showing me what the 10,000 Races Illustrated Handbook actually does. Entry 1. I can look at any living creature in this tower and read its full information, species, stats, skills, weaknesses, like flipping to its page in an encyclopedia. And for anything weaker than a certain threshold, they don't even feel me do it. I get to study the exam while everyone else is guessing. Entry 2. Kill 100 of the same race, and I permanently learn one of that race's skills. Free. Off the corpse pile. Entry 3, and this is where I stopped breathing for a second. Kill 10 bosses of my current tier, and the handbook itself levels up. F to E. E to D, all the way up the ladder. My talent isn't a fixed grade. My talent is a grade I get to climb, one boss at a time, as high as I'm willing to go. And then, very softly, a voice that was not the standard system voice, a deeper, older thing, the tower speaking to me directly, which I would later learn it almost never does, added a footnote. Kill 10 SS rank bosses, it said, and the handbook advances to SSS. SSS, the era master grade, the one my teacher had said comes around once a century. 10 SSS bosses? I asked, out loud. Like an idiot, to a tower. There was a pause, and I swear the thing sounded almost amused. You can give it a try. Cool, 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 cool. No pressure. I still had to name my hero profile, the identity I'd carry through every trial from now on. The system wanted a handle. I typed the first thing that mattered to me, Tao. It's the name my father picked before I was born, back when he and Wei-Jun's dad had done that old sworn brother thing where they promised their unborn kids to each other, which, surprise, turned out to be 2 boys, so instead of a wedding, I got a lifelong best friend and a very confused matchmaker. My father left before I was old enough to remember his face. I got the name he chose and nothing else. So, Tao. I went to review it before confirming. The system confirmed it. I hadn't finished. Wait, I wasn't. Confirmed again. And a third time. 3 auto-confirms, boom boom boom, and a cheerful little notice informing me that hero identities are permanent and cannot be changed unless the user dies. So my options for a name correction were, die, or live with it. Tao it is, I said. Great start. Locked into a name by a system with the reflexes of a toddler slapping a big red button. If the rest of this went the way the naming had, I was going to have an interesting week. It did not go the way the naming had. It went so much better. Because the handbook wasn't done handing me things, and this is where I need you to sit down. The system ran a 5-dimension scan on me, the standard base stat readout every awakened kid gets. Strength, spirit, stamina, agility, composure. Mine came back at 44 across the board, which, for context, is top 1% of humans' territory. The golden boy body was, at least, an actual advantage and not just good PR. The handbook's weak little passive bumped each of those by 1. 45. Fine. Nice. Whatever. Then it noticed a 6th stat that most people never even get to touch. Luck. Luck is special. You can't train it, you can't buy points into it, and 1 single point of it is worth a flat 10% boost to how good your drops are, forever. Most humans awaken with luck somewhere in the single digits and never move it a hair for the rest of their lives. Mine sat at 49 and, crucially, it had a little plus sign next to it. Editable. The system was, for reasons I did not yet understand, going to let me put points into the one stat you're never allowed to put points into, and right then the goddess of fortune showed up. Not literally. A blessing, a unique blessing, the kind of thing the textbook swore up and down only ever attaches to A+ talents. It reset my skill points and dropped 49 free ones in my lap and more or less winked at me. I looked at the little plus sign next to luck. I looked at my 49 free points. I did the math a toddler could do. I dumped everything into luck. The number climbed. 49. Done. And the system chimed that great evolution completes at 50 and I'd hit the ceiling a single point early, which is the kind of technicality I would learn to expect from a life run entirely on luck. Luck. Max. And the second it maxed, a buff unfurled across my vision with a name I'm going to be saying a lot. Heavenly Blessing. Child of Fortune. Here is what Child of Fortune does, in the order I discovered it, each line hitting harder than the last. Any item that drops for me automatically upgrades 1 tier. Every event settles 1 step in my favor. Every enhancement I ever attempt succeeds at 100%. Every attack I make rolls its hit chance somewhere between 99 and 100. I don't get lucky. I have deleted the concept of unlucky from my personal reality and mailed it out of the building. I stood there grinning like a moron. And the tower, apparently deciding the moron deserved more, kept going. See, my 5 base stats were 40-something and my luck was maxed. And the system, doing its own math, concluded that a person with maxed luck and merely mortal base stats was an unbalanced tragedy it simply could not allow. So it handed me 5 more blessings, 1 from each of the 5 stat gods: strength, spirit, stamina, agility, composure, and each one grants a permanent +1 to that stat every single time I level up. Every level, 5 free points, forever. For reference, ordinary awakened kids start earning bonus points like that around level 20. I'd have 50 of them banked by level 10. I want to be clear that I had, at this point, done nothing. I hadn't swung a sword, I hadn't killed a rat, I had drawn the worst talent in the building, gotten laughed at by 300 people, and accidentally named myself after a button mash, and the universe had responded by walking up and quietly loading a cheat code into me one line at a time. Is this the treatment they give the chosen one? I said, to no one. The tower did not answer that one. Smart. Some questions you don't dignify. The newbie gift pack was next. Every trial taker gets one, a little starter bundle to keep you alive through the first hour. Most kids get a rusty knife and a health potion. I opened mine and a set of equipment tumbled out. The Flame Spirit set, B grade, which for a starter pack is already generous, except I have Child of Fortune, and Child of Fortune upgrades every drop one tier. So the B grade Flame Spirit set arrived in my hands as the A grade Supreme Flame Spirit set, and I read the description with my mouth slowly falling open. A sword that splashes fire on every hit and carries a 1% chance to trigger something called Flame Dragon's Wrath, armor that wraps me in a dragon scale barrier, boots that let me walk on flame and automatically dodge the one hit that would have killed me, and the set bonus, the part that made it insane for a level 0 nobody. It drops the level requirement by 10, which meant I, a freshly minted level 0 garbage rank, could equip an A grade set right now, in the chamber, before I'd so much as met a monster. I put it on. My stats jumped to 30 across the board, my attack to 120, my health to 720. From consolation prize to armored in under a minute, and then the pack coughed up one more thing, a small ember of a stone, warm in my palm, labeled Heart of Flame. You already know what Child of Fortune did to it. It upgraded into an S-rank Flame God Heart Shard. 1 of 7, the description said, 1 of 7 fragments of the heart of an actual god of fire. Fire attack plus 100%. Fire resistance plus 100%, fire criticals for 2.5 times damage, and the right to learn 3 fire skills on the spot. I learned them. Explosive Flame Bullet, a 360 damage shot. Prairie Fire, an area burn that ticked for over 3,000. And the third one? The third one made me go quiet the way the SSSS footnote had. Starfire Undying, SSS rank. Every creature I kill leaves a mark on me, stacking up to 100, and whenever I want, I detonate all my stored marks at once, and the blast does the number of marks times my full attack plus firepower. Or, if I'd rather, it turns that whole payload into healing instead. At 100 stacked marks, the detonation lands at 28,000 damage, 28,000 on a level 0. From a talent the whole schoolyard had just held a funeral for, I closed all the windows, one after another, and stood alone in a chamber that was already dissolving around me, getting ready to spit me out into wherever my trial actually was. Somewhere above me, 300 kids were still probably laughing about the F rank. Somewhere in another chamber, Wei Jun was hopefully not getting eaten. Somewhere out past the top of this tower, my mother was going to walk into an adult trial in a few months with the same F rank letter I'd just drawn. I looked at the sword on my hip and the god's heart in my chest and the impossible gold lines that only I could read. You call this an F-level talent? I said, to the 300 people who couldn't hear me anymore. Then the floor opened and dropped me into hell, and I went in grinning. Hell, it turned out, was an island. I landed on a beach of black sand under a white sky, and the metal bracelet every trial taker wears, the one that's secretly a database of every map the tower has ever run, woke up on my wrist and started matching my surroundings against its records. It found the match fast. And then it gave me the kind of readout that would have made a normal level 0 sit right back down in the surf. Kirishima. Difficulty, extremely high. Human pass rate, 10%. In 800 years of the tower running this particular island, exactly 1 human had ever cleared it with an SSS rating. 1, 520 years ago, plus 3 who managed SS and 16 who scraped an S. Everyone else either failed or fed the fog, because that was the island's trick. The whole place was drowned in a thick white mist that rolled between the trees like it had somewhere to be, and the mist was not scenery. Step wrong in it, and it killed you. Pits, snares, things with teeth that you never saw coming. There was exactly one safe path threading through the island toward the center, and my job was simple to say and hard to do. Walk that path from the shore to the temple at the heart of the island, killing the monster zones in order, level 1 through level 10. Clear 60% of the island and I passed the trial. Clear more and the rewards climbed. 2/3 of the way in, there'd be a temple guardian, a level 10 elite that on its own turned away 4 out of 5 of the people who got that far. And at the very center, on a throne, whatever the island had chosen to be its final boss this cycle, a different monster every edition, and always the part that actually decided things. I pulled up the history while I still had the quiet. The last few final bosses had been fire dragons twice, and 350 years back, a humanoid swordsman that nobody had beaten, and that lone SSSS clear 520 years ago, the record that still stood was flagged with a note the database didn't explain. The human who said it had slain the island's fire dragon and then simply never left the tower again. I filed that away, a 500-year-old mystery on an island I now had to walk across. Sure, nothing about that could possibly come back around and put a sword to my throat later. Foreshadowing is a funny thing. You never notice it until it's standing on your neck. For now, I had a beach, a path, and a full inventory of a fire god's worst ideas. I rolled my shoulders, drew the Supreme Flame Spirit Sword, and walked into the fog to go meet the neighbors. The level 1 zone was rats. Cave giant rats, a couple hundred of them, boiling out of a mound of packed earth the second I got close. The kind of writhing gray tide that's supposed to be your terrifying first lesson in how outnumbered you are. I raised the sword and took one swing at the nearest one, a completely ordinary opening swing, the sword 101 of it, and the 1% Flame Dragon's Wrath triggered on the first hit, 1%. First swing. That's Child of Fortune doing what Child of Fortune does. It took a 1 in 100 proc and served it to me on strike number 1 like it had been waiting all morning. A dragon made of fire erupted out of my blade, 5,000 burning damage a second, and it did not care about the concept of the rat I was aiming at. It swept the entire mound. 200 rats went up at once. The earth itself cooked and collapsed inward, and when the fire cleared, there was a smoking crater where a rodent apocalypse used to be, and absolutely nothing left to loot. Not a whisker. The fire had been so thorough, it had incinerated the drops along with the donors. I stood at the edge of my brand new crater, level ticking up to 1, completion ticking up to 6%, 100 starfire marks quietly banked in my chest from all those kills, and one small line at the bottom of my vision informing me I'd learned the rat race's quick attack skill off the pile. Turned a 1% chance into a 100% wipe on the first swing, I said. Who else can do that? Nobody. That was rather the point. I also made a mental note that my single best skill deletes my own paycheck, which felt like the sort of thing that would stay funny right up until it wasn't. Onward. Level 2 was, of all things, adorable. Roo-roo rabbits. Little round bonus creatures with an attack stat of 1, maybe 2, whose entire combat doctrine was to flee in terror and heal themselves while fleeing. Not a threat. A resource. I herded the whole fluffy panic of them into a rocky corner with my new quick attack, dropped a prairie fire that roasted 150 of them in one warm sweep, and cleaned up the stragglers with the sword, every single strike a critical, because of course it was. Learned their Spirit of Grass skill, a little 5% heal. And then the loot came up, and my whole brain changed channels. Snow rabbit fur. E-grade, upgraded from F by you-know-who, 120 pelts of it. And roasted rabbit meat, 80 portions, already cooked by the fire, because apparently my kill method doubles as a kitchen. Here's the thing you have to understand about me, and it's not a flattering thing, but it's true. I grew up counting money. When your mother is F rank, and it's just the two of you, you learn young exactly what everything costs. And my bracelet told me one E-grade snow rabbit pelt sold for about 1,000 yuan out in the world. 1,000 yuan. Half a month's rent, in my hand, times 120, off a pile of bunnies that had tried to run away from me. But I wasn't doing the rent math. I was doing a different math. 120 pelts is a lot of warm coats. My mom feels the cold. So does Wei Zhen's mom, his stepmother, technically, the woman who raised him after his own mother passed, and who has snuck me dumplings across a kitchen counter more times than my actual mother has. 2 coats, minimum, the good thick kind, and enough meat left over that neither household would look at a grocery bill for a month. I stuffed the fur and the food into my pack before I'd cleared the completion notice. 12%, first loot of my entire hero career, and I'd already spent it, in my head, on 2 women who'd spent my whole childhood keeping me fed. You can be a walking cheat code and still, at the bottom, just be a kid who wants his mom to have a warm coat. Both things fit in one person. I'd learned that a lot this week. Level 3 tried to be scary and mostly succeeded at being expensive. Knife-horned sheep. 200 of them. A stampede with blades on their skulls. The kind of charge that flattens the average trial taker into a wall decoration. I didn't fight the charge. I insulted it. I stood in the open, called them every name a sheep can understand, let them build up into one committed thundering mass, and I waited, sword low, watching a little cooldown timer, until Flame Dragon's Wrath came back off its leash. Second trigger of the day, the dragon took the entire flock in one pass. The good news, 200 dead sheep, completion up to 18%, another race skill on the pile. The bad news, knife-horned sheep carry gorgeous horn and hide, worth real money, and my dragon had reduced all of it to a fine gray ash drifting down over the grass like the world's least festive snow. I crouched, ran my fingers through the powder that used to be a paycheck, and sighed. Best skill I own, I told the ash, and it eats the loot every time. You are a very expensive party trick. The ash did not apologize. It never would. This was going to be our whole relationship. Level 4 is where I found out I have a phobia. The zone was a dark, misty stretch of forest, and it was full of snakes. Mandala snakes, Datura serpents, a swarm of them, magic attackers that spit venom, and their venom stacks paralysis, up to 10 stacks, each stack shaving your speed until you're a statue they can eat at leisure. That's a genuinely nasty kit. It would ruin most people. And I would love to tell you I met it with cold tactical calm. I did not. I do not like snakes. I have never liked snakes. Something about the way they move short-circuits the reasonable part of my brain, and when the first dozen came pouring down out of the branches, I made a sound I will not be transcribing and panic cast prairie fire in a wide, undignified circle just to put fire between me and them. Then, through the flames, I actually read their attack numbers off the handbook, the thing I should have done before screaming, and felt extremely stupid. Their venom hit me for 1 damage. 1. My magic defense was 132. These paralysis stacking nightmares were chipping at me a single point at a time, which meant it would take one of them roughly the length of a feature film to bring down a health bar I could heal in a second. So I stopped screaming and started hacking, and somewhere in the middle of methodically clearing a forest full of the thing I'm most afraid of, I got over the thing I'm most afraid of, which is a personal growth arc I did not order but will accept, learned their paralyzing venom skill, and the loot was the best kind, the kind you keep instead of sell. Viper glands, E-grade, and each one was a thrown weapon waiting to happen. Crack it on something and it pumps 50 poison damage a second for a full hour. That's 180,000 damage sealed inside one gross little sack I could lob at a problem and walk away from. I collected every single one. Completion, 24%. Snake phobia, cured. Pockets, full of poison. And up ahead through the trees, the ground started to shake with something a great deal heavier than sheep. Level 5 had a boss, and bosses, it turned out, were where this actually got fun. Barbarian bulls. A whole herd of them, thick-muscled and bad-tempered, and standing head and shoulders above the rest. The barbarian bull leader, a level 5 field boss, 220 attack, 2000 health, 150 defense, and 2 moves that make it a wall for beginners, a charge that flattens you in a straight line, and a trample that stuns everything around it. The handbook laid the whole thing out for me like a scouting report, which is genuinely unfair, and I want to stress that I know it's unfair, and I enjoyed it anyway. The charge was the problem. Straight line, enormous damage, but dumb, it commits, so I gave it something to commit to. There was a river cutting across the zone, and there was one particularly handsome bull grazing near it, and I am sorry to that bull specifically, because I walked up and killed it purely to make its boss angry. It worked. The leader put its head down and charged me across open ground, and I stepped aside at the last second and let 220 attack worth of furious beef commit itself straight into the river, where it floundered, and where I now had all the time in the world. I kited the herd around in loose circles, guerrilla style, chipping and running, stacking starfire marks off every bull that got close, a mark per kill, climbing toward 100, and when the counter filled and the leader hauled itself back onto dry land looking for me, I turned around and detonated the whole stack in its face. Starfire undying at full charge. The boss simply ceased. I didn't even watch it land. Real men don't look back at explosions. I was already walking, and Flame Dragon's wrath came off cooldown right on cue to clean up whatever the blast had left of the herd. Boss down. Kill count toward my handbook upgrade, 1 of 10. And then the boss did the thing bosses do, which is pay you properly for the first time. A talent, Barbarian Bull Strength, straight into my collection. Their trample skill, a pair of E-grade gloves, and Spirit Stones, 20 fragments of E-grade Spirit Stone, the actual currency the whole tower economy runs on, worth around 2 million out in the world. 2 million. My mom and I do not spend 2 million in a year. I stood there holding a lifetime of my family's expenses in one fist and had to take a second. There was also a lucky ring, +1 luck, which is a beautiful item and completely useless to me because my luck is already the number the universe stops counting at, so straight into the sell pile it went. The first genuinely funny problem of being me, owning a treasure whose entire value is a stat I've already broken, and a skill book, charge, B grade, worth 1.2 million on its own. Most people would sell that. I ate it. I learned charge, because a boss's straight line rush is a lot more useful in my hands than the coins, and I had a feeling I'd want to be somewhere else in a hurry more than once this week. Also, a slab of mountain opening python bull meat, D grade, which permanently adds 3 strength if you eat it, so I did. Dinner and a raise, completion 30%. And I'll tell you the thought I had standing over that boss, because it's the thought that keeps me honest. My stats had climbed, sure, strength 53, everything else in the 40s, physical attack up around 190, health pushing 900, good numbers, but not magic numbers. Here's the brutal little truth of talent grades. An F multiplies your power by about 5%, and an SSS multiplies it by 1280. That gap is a cliff, which means somewhere out there, a kid who awakened a genuine SSS talent this same morning could, in theory, match everything I was doing without a single cheat. So I don't win because my talent is good. My talent, on paper, is garbage. I win because I'm wearing a god's equipment, throwing a god's skills, reading everyone's exam over their shoulder, and stacking combos most people never think to try. The luck opened the door. Everything after the door, I have to actually do. I found that reassuring, honestly. It meant the story wasn't man gets lucky. It was man gets one door, then has to be smart enough to walk through it. I like that story better. It's got a hero in it instead of a lottery ticket. Level 6 tried to eat me, and I mean that literally. Blue silver grass. Looks like a meadow. Is a predator. I walked in and the ground came alive. Creeping weeds whipping up around my legs, my waist, my arms, wrapping me tighter and tighter until and I checked the handbook mid-panic to confirm the exact indignity, being turned into a zongzi, a rice dumpling, a person-shaped snack wrapped up neat for suffocation. The grass has 0 attack. It doesn't hit you, it constricts you and drinks you, life-stealing while it squeezes, and it splits off new strains faster than you can cut, so brute force just makes more salad. Trample broke the ground around me. Prairie fire burned me a breathing hole. But the real problem was that killing all of it, strain by splitting strain, was going to take forever, and about 10 minutes in my mana ran dry, and I had to sit down in a field that was actively trying to digest me and meditate to recover, which is exactly as relaxing as it sounds. This was the first zone that was genuinely tedious, and tedium is the mother of invention. I remembered the gross little sacks in my pack. I lobbed a viper gland into the thickest patch of grass, and the grass, being a plant that devours everything it touches, devoured it, and then mass poisoned itself to death from the inside, one gland taking out about 10 plants worth of connected root. I stood in the middle of the meadow throwing poison at the salad and letting it eat its own doom, and I have rarely felt smarter. Learned blue-silver entanglement, which is a binding skill I had no way to power, and kept a live blue-silver parasite. E-grade, grows in 5 seconds flat, dangerous as anything, precisely because it was the one thing that could feed my new useless skill later. Completion, 36%. I was building a toolbox out of everything that had tried to kill me. That's the job. Level 7 was almost an apology. Sand pigs, timid, blind, ostrich-brained pig folk whose big scary move is to kick up a cloud of blinding dust and then bury their own heads in the sand and hope you go away. I'd actually read a veteran's post about this exact tactic once, back when I still thought I'd need study notes to survive, and the counter is stupid and perfect. The second the blind dust goes up, you charge straight out of the cloud, and now you can see, and they can't. I bought that knowledge for free with somebody else's forum post and cashed it in for a slaughter. Pentakill, over and over, learned their flying sand and moving stones skill, completion 42%, and not one of them ever saw me. Some fights are a test, some fights are a chore you get paid for. I've made my peace with both. Levels 8 and 9 came as a matched set, and this is where the toolbox started clicking together into something that felt less like a beginner flailing and more like a person with a plan. Wind Wolves first. Level 8, Wind Element, and nasty about it. A stealth pack that goes invisible and hits from angles, so I stopped letting them pick the angles. Flying sand to blind the pack, a blue-silver barrier at my back so nothing could flank me, and then Flame Dragon's Wrath down the middle when they bunched. 200 wolves gone, and their Shadow Raid skill was mine. Then level 9, Flamingos, Firebirds, and the tower clearly thought Firebirds would be a problem for someone. The tower had not read my equipment, my fire immunity, 20% from the dragon body, 50 from the set, plus the resistance stacked on top, sat around 70%, and their 100 points of fire attack run through my defense came out to a clean 0. They dove at me breathing fire, and I stood in it like a man enjoying a warm afternoon. Then I grew blue-silver on their backs to weigh them down, Prairie fired the flock, and Charge leaped into the air to hand-deliver viper glands to the ones still flying. Learned Flameline, a little thing that adds 3 meters of fire whip to my basic swing, which quietly turned my sword into a 4-meter critical hitting problem. Completion climbed through 48 and up to 54%. I was over halfway across an island that eats 90% of the people who set foot on it, and I hadn't taken a real scratch. Then I reached level 10, and level 10 did not want visitors. Rotten poison white ants, the island's own native race, the thing that actually lived here before the tower turned the place into an exam. Poison heavy, endless, and smart enough to hole up inside the temple at the island's heart, which meant to clear my 200 I'd have to root them out of their own fortress. The melee pass rate on this zone alone is 5%. Most people who die on Kirishima die with ant venom in them. I did not intend to be a statistic. I hit the swarm with Flame Dragon's Wrath, and the dragon, Doing what the dragon always does, over-delivered. It wiped the ants and brought down a good chunk of the temple with them, stone folding in on itself in a roar of dust. And damaging the temple woke up the thing the temple was for. Mist Island Hunter, Rotten Poison White Ant Emperor, a level 10 E-rank boss, 500 attack, 500 defense, 5,000 health, and a genuinely dangerous rhythm. It spawns 100 fresh ants at a time and shelters behind them, and only when it stops to lay the next brood does it drop its guard for a window. Amateurs throw themselves at the wall of ants and get ground down. I read the rhythm off the handbook and just waited. Let it spawn. Let the ants come, harvesting a fresh mark off everyone I killed, refilling my starfire stack to 100 while the boss thought it was winning. And the exact moment it settled in to lay its next brood, guard down, window open, I detonated the whole 100-mark payload into it and ended a 5,000 health boss between one heartbeat and the next. The rewards were a haul, a poison talent, dominance over the ant race, and a summon I want you to remember. Because it comes back. A heart-eating blood ant emperor I could call to my side, with a colony shelter ability that lets me hide inside my own ally's body for protection. Write that one down. It's going to save my life in about an hour in the single dumbest sounding way possible. Plus, an A-grade poison soul, opening a whole poison route of skills I hadn't earned yet. Completion ticked from 60 to 61%. Past the 60 I needed to pass. I'd officially cleared the trial. Anything from here was gravy, but before I moved on, the collapsed temple coughed up one last thing out of the rubble, and it stopped me cold. Not a drop. Not loot, a skeleton, human, female, by the frame. And old, 500 years old, the handbook said, undigested, sitting in the belly of a race that had apparently kept it all this time without ever breaking it down. A 500-year-old human woman, dead on a monster island 800 years into the apocalypse, preserved like something was waiting for someone to come get her. I stood there in the dust holding a stranger's bones, and I had no idea yet whose they were, or that the answer was sitting on a throne a few hundred meters ahead of me, or that it had been waiting for her to come back for 5 centuries. I wrapped the skeleton carefully, put it in my pack, and walked toward the center of the island. That's just what you do. You don't leave a person in the dirt, even when you don't know their name, especially then. The last thing between me and the throne room was a pair of temple guardians. 2 enormous stone statues, one flanking each side of the inner gate. E-rank elites with 10,000 health apiece and a passive called Unwavering that heals them back up faster than most finalists can chew through it. This is the wall that stops the last of the last. 4 out of 5 people who make it this deep turnaround right here because they can't out-damage the regeneration. It's a damage check with a face carved on it. I was not, at this point, someone you put a damage check in front of. I bound them both in place with blue silver, layered on a bone-melting palm from the poison root that had opened up off the Ant Emperor's soul. A debuff that eats away at defense so the healing stops mattering, and then just opened up with everything at once. 2,000 damage a second and climbing. 10 seconds. Both statues came apart at roughly the same time, and the gate behind them ground open. Completion jumped from 61 to 81%, A-rank territory, and I hadn't even reached the boss yet. I stepped through the gate into a wide stone hall, and something invisible pressed a sword against my throat. I felt the edge of it against my skin, cold and exact, held by a hand I couldn't see. It should have killed me. It did 0 damage, and a voice came out of the empty air in front of me, cracked and thin and unbearably tired, like a man waking from a sleep that had lasted centuries. Finally, it said, "You've come. How many years has it been?" She has returned. The invisibility peeled away, and there was a man on a throne. Human. Actually, provably, handbook confirmed human. And the handbook gave me the rest of it in a cold little block of text that turned my stomach over. Heart of Despair, Song Yu, SS rank boss, attack 2,164, movement speed 365 meters a second, supersonic, faster than I could track, 7 skills, and the last one flagged SSS, Forbidden Wind Surge, and a history. Song Yu was the one. The lone human who'd cleared this island with an SSS rating 520 years ago. The one who'd slain the fire dragon that used to sit on this exact throne. The dragon whose scales and heart and fire had, 5 centuries and 1 lucky boy later, become the set on my back and the god shard in my chest. My whole kit was hand-me-downs from the man now sitting in front of me. And after his impossible victory, he had not gone home a hero. He had stayed. He had become the island's final boss himself. The record holder had turned into the trap. Why, I said, because I genuinely needed to know, is the greatest human this island ever saw sitting here as a monster? He didn't answer that. His eyes had gone past me, to my pack, to the wrapped shape inside it, and when he spoke again, his voice broke in half. "Alon," he said, "you found Alon." A wind I didn't feel slid the skeleton out of my pack and carried it gently across the hall into his arms, and this man, this SS rank monster, this 500-year legend, This thing the tower had built to end people, folded over a bundle of old bones and wept like it was the first day of the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Because for him, in a way, it was. He'd been waiting for this exact moment for 520 years, and it had finally arrived, and it was still made entirely of grief. He pulled himself together enough to wave a hand at me. A window opened in my vision, an SS rating, granted, free, no fight required. "You've done more than enough," he said. "Take the rating, leave this place. I have no wish to harm a child of the race his voice caught. Just go, let an old man keep his company. Charity." He was handing me an SS clear out of pity and grief so I'd leave him alone with his dead. And I want to be honest about what I did next, because it wasn't kind, exactly. I refused it. I looked at the strongest human I'd ever seen crying over a woman he'd failed to save, and instead of taking the gift and walking, I picked the meanest, truest question I had, and I threw it at him. "You cleared this island," I said. "You beat the thing sitting on this throne. You could have gone home and stood between the human race and everything that's been grinding us down for 800 years. A real SSS, a real era master, when we get maybe one a century, and we needed you, and you stayed here, to sit on a chair, to guard a grave. You call that love?" I made myself keep going. "That's not love. That's a man who decided one dead woman was worth more than every living person who's died in the 500 years you sulked on this rock. She saved you so you could do something. You did nothing. You disgraced her." His head came up. For the first time, the grief in his face had something else under it. Anger. Good. Anger I could work with. "Draw your sword," I said. "If I'm wrong, prove it on me." He stood. And here is the strange, gentle thing that happened. In the middle of all that fury, he answered my questions first, like a gentleman, like a man who'd been alone with these questions for 5 centuries and was almost grateful someone had finally asked them out loud. He told me the rules he was bound by, that the only way anyone left this room with an SSS was to kill the boss in it, to kill him, and that he had chosen to stay, that no one had forced the throne on him. And then he asked quietly if I would fight him honestly, at full strength, SSS skill against SSS skill, so that whatever the answer was, it would be true. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I'd come this far being lucky. The least I could do was be honest. He moved first, and I could not see him move. 365 meters a second is a rumor, not a swordsman. But he wasn't trying to cut me down cheaply. He was building to the big one, and I watched the wind gather in the hall until the air itself turned white and screaming, and the handbook flashed the number I'd been dreading. Forbidden wind surge, 21,800 damage, over 1,000 meters by 1,000. There was no dodging that. There was no tanking that. It was going to fill the entire room with death. So I did the single dumbest sounding thing in my whole arsenal, the one I told you to write down. I summoned the heart-eating blood ant emperor, and I climbed inside it. Colony shelter, my own ally's body as a bunker, and because I count as Ant Clan now, the tower let me do it. The forbidden wind surge went off and scoured the entire hall down to bare stone, vaporized my summon, screamed itself out, and I walked out of the settling dust without a scratch, having survived a god-tier attack by hiding inside a bug. Dignity is a currency I spend freely. Survival doesn't care how you look. And then it was my turn, and I had a full 100 starfire marks, and I detonated them into a man who no longer had any wind left to raise. It landed clean. Song Yu went down. Except he didn't die. A green light wrapped him. The wind spirit state. 10 minutes of pure invincibility, and he rose back up untouched, and I braced for round 2. It didn't come. He was smiling. "You could have taken the free rating and left," he said. "You didn't. You called me a coward to my face and then fought me honestly instead of taking the easy win." He shook his head slowly. "It was never a test of strength, boy. I could have ended you in the first second, and you know it. It was a test of what kind of person the tower finally sent me. I've turned away a great many strong people from this room over 500 years. I was waiting for the right one." His voice dropped. "I threw the fight. I have been waiting to lose to someone worth losing to. He'd let me win." The whole duel had been an interview, and I'd passed it by being too stubborn to accept his charity. Then he told me the rest, and this is the part I don't make jokes over, so I won't. He gave me a sword. He drew it out of the air and set it in my hands. The Chungying sword, one of the 10 ancient swords, an SS-grade artifact worth more than everything else I'd looted on the island combined, and he gave it to me like it was nothing, like it was change from his pocket. And he asked me one thing in return, not for himself. He asked me to take him and Alan back to the UA state, to the ground they'd come from, and put them in it together. 500 years he'd guarded her bones, and all he wanted at the end of it was to go home. And because I'd asked, he finally told me how they got here. He'd been a slave. a UA state boy, orphaned young when humans were still busy killing humans in the old civil wars, back before we understood that the only thing keeping us alive was each other. And Alan had been a noblewoman, one of the people who, by every rule of that world, should have looked straight through a slave boy and never seen him. She saw him, she bought his freedom, and then refused to act like she owned it. I only want to protect you, she told him, and she'd meant it. And a boy who had never once been protected by anyone built his entire soul around that sentence. He got strong for her. That was the whole reason. He cleared this impossible island so that he'd finally be someone who could stand next to her instead of behind her. And when he reached the top and unlocked the island's sight, the vision that lets the master of Kirishima see every inch of the fog, the first thing he saw with it was Alan, alive, coming for him, one zone away, a single step from the reunion he'd bled a mountain for. And he watched, from the throne, with the eyes he'd earned, unable to cross his own island fast enough, as the rotten poison white ant emperor took her a step short of the gate. He couldn't even get to the body. The ants dragged her into their warren, and he could not follow the rules of his own victory out to reach her. So he made a trade with the tower, the only trade left to a man who has won everything and lost the only thing. He gave up his freedom, his future, his rating, his return, all of it, in exchange for one condition, that he be allowed to stay, to become the island's boss. To sit on the throne with the island's sight and keep watch over the place where her bones were, and wait for 520 years on the 1 in a million chance that someday someone would come through who was strong enough to dig her out of that warren and kind enough to bring her to him instead of selling her bones for spirit stones. That someone was a garbage rank kid the whole world had laughed at that morning. The universe took its time, he said, looking down at her, but it has a sense of humor after all. He was already starting to come apart at the edges, the green light unspooling into the air. I've held on long enough, I can let go now. He lifted his eyes to me one last time, and there was nothing tired left in them at all. The future of the human race is in your hands, boy. Don't sit on a throne over it. Carry it somewhere. Then Song Yu was gone, and the hall was very quiet, and I was standing alone with 2 swords, a set of bones I now knew the name of, and a promise I fully intended to keep. I did not make a joke. Some rooms you just stand in for a minute, and then the sky did the joke for me. Because Song Yu's death was the last kill on the island, and killing the final boss finished the clear, and finishing the clear made the tower add up my score, and the score was an SSS. A genuine, record-tying, once-a-century SSS rating, the same grade Song Yu himself had set 500 years ago, except I have Child of Fortune, and Child of Fortune settles every event one step in my favor. So it rounded up. SSS became SSSS, a rating that, the tower helpfully informed me, had not been achieved by anyone in 900 trial cycles. Not rare, not first in a century. First, period. And then, because the universe apparently wasn't done making a spectacle of me, the tower broadcast it, not to the island, to the world. A decree went out across every race's feed at once, in letters the size of buildings. Human, Tau. First quadruple S rating in 900 sessions. Clear time, 7 hours and 3 minutes. 7 hours. Song Yu bled 5 centuries into that record, and I beat it before lunch, on the strength of a talent people had held a funeral for at breakfast. I want to be clear that I know exactly how absurd that is. I was there. The rewards were not subtle. The tower doesn't reward a rating like that to a person, it rewards it to a species. Every human alive got exempted from the next great liquidation, the periodic culling the races run on us like we're pests. Every human got the immortal body blessing, which is exactly what it sounds like and which I would come to appreciate enormously. A care aura on every newbie, plus 20% to survive their first week, a full 7 days of double experience for the entire race. I hadn't just passed a test, I'd bought 8 billion strangers a week of not dying, and most of them would never know my face. The humans watching that broadcast lost their minds. Tau God was trending on a species that mostly communicates in survival bulletins, and the races watching that same broadcast did the opposite, and this is the part I enjoyed with my whole chest. Somewhere a dragon venerable was slamming furniture, refusing to believe an F-rank had done this, already muttering dark suspicions about whether I was secretly something older wearing a human mask. Which, no, I'm just a guy from Jiangnan with a good sword and a worse sense of self-preservation. The Phoenix clan took an interest. The Black Tortoise clan, the giant turtles who technically hold humanity's deed, remember them? Took a very interested, very proprietary interest, the way a landlord perks up when a tenant turns out to be secretly rich. And in the middle of all that, quiet under the noise, one human girl with an SSS talent and a baby face read my name off the broadcast and filed it away with a small private smile, thinking she'd like to fight beside me someday. Remember her too. She becomes my problem in the nicest possible way. But that was all later. Right then, I still had loot to collect because a clear like that pays like a clear like that. A job scroll came up, an SSSS grade class change, and Child of Fortune took its 1% flourish and turned it into the top result. Flame Dominator upgraded straight past into a Supreme SSS class, Magic Warrior. Both halves of the fight, magic and blade, in one body, and a fusion trait that let me eat other class certificates to feed an endless growth engine, star by star, no ceiling, a bottomless pit of a class for a bottomless pit of a talent, fitting. An artifact chest gave up an SS melting gold sunset blade that I couldn't even lift yet because my strength wasn't 100, which is the funniest kind of treasure, the kind you have to grow into. I kept Song Yu's Chengying sword on my hip instead, and a Gale Sword Soul certificate dropped that would make a perfect gift for exactly one person I knew, a round, loyal, snack-loving person in another chamber somewhere, so I pocketed it with his name on it, and then the island handed me its deed, control of Kirishima, the whole map mine to run as I saw fit. Now, there were still other races trial takers scattered across my island, working their way toward a throne I now owned. And I just spent the morning learning, in detail, exactly how the fog kills, where the poison zones sit, and how the bosses hunt. So I did what any newly minted landlord with a 1,000-year grudge would do. I turned the traps back on. I redeployed the poison formations. I pointed the guardians outward, and I let the island I'd conquered do to my oppressor's children what their oppressor's parents had spent 800 years doing to mine. On my rock, I decided who walked off it. It's not a nice thing to enjoy. I enjoyed it anyway. 800 years is a long time to be polite about. The last duty of an island's owner is to set its next final boss. Every map needs one, and the throne doesn't stay empty. The tower offered me a template. I could spin up a copy of the last boss, 80% of the original stats, stripped of its equipment, stripped of its memories, stripped of everything that had made it a person. A hollow with a familiar shape. I looked at the option for a long moment. And then, because I couldn't stand the throne being anyone else's, I chose it. A Gale Sword Soul in the likeness of Song Yu shimmered into being on the seat and knelt to me, his face, his stance, none of his soul. It didn't call me boy. It didn't ask about Alan. It didn't know her name. It was just a strong, empty thing wearing the outline of the best man I'd ever met, and it would sit there guarding an empty island for the next trial takers to break their teeth on. Stand up, I told it. You don't kneel to anybody. It stood, because I'd ordered it to, which was not the same thing at all, and we both knew it, except only one of us could know anything. I took the real Song Yu and the real Alan, wrapped safe in my pack, and I left the copy on the throne, and I did not look back at that one either, but for a completely different reason than the sheep. I had a home to get back to, and 2 people to bury on the way. But first the tower opened a door I hadn't earned before that morning and walked me into a mall. An SSSS clear comes with access to the 0th floor. The 10,000 races trading market, a vast no-combat bazaar where every race in the tower comes to buy and sell, and where, mercifully, you can keep your identity hidden behind a booth. My whole pack was full of things worth money, and I, a boy who had spent 18 years knowing the price of everything, very much wanted to convert monster parts into a mother who never had to worry again. The human section of the market was suspiciously empty and quiet, roped off and calm, which I was too new to find strange, and would later understand had been arranged that way, for me, by people I hadn't met yet. What I did meet was a short, round, magnificently smug man in expensive robes named Bao Fu, who introduced himself as a small-time local merchant and was lying through every gold tooth. The handbook wouldn't read him. He was above my pay grade to scan, but you don't need a talent to spot a whale playing minnow. This man radiated the specific serenity of someone who could buy the building. He offered me tea worth $1 million a cup, watched me drink money I couldn't even taste, and called it just something to wet the throat. I played the wide-eyed country boy right back at him, because 2 people pretending to be less than they are is my favorite kind of conversation, and we haggled like that, both grinning, both aware the other one knew. Then I put 2 S-grade spirit stones on the counter, and he paid me $24 billion for them without blinking, and I learned in real time what the numbers in this economy actually mean. I need you to sit with me on this. That morning, I had done arithmetic about rabbit pelts. 1 pelt, 1,000 yuan, half a month's rent, and I'd been genuinely thrilled. And now a fat man was sliding $24 billion across a table for 2 rocks and calling it a fair Tuesday. The kid who counted coins and the man holding a fortune were the same person, standing in the same body, about 4 hours apart. I did not let my face move. Inside, the coin-counting kid was screaming. I sold the rest smart. The snow rabbit fur went, but I traded a chunk of it straight for 2 D-grade fox coats, the good warm kind, because that had been the plan since level 2, and no amount of billions was going to make me forget it. Ox materials, sparrow feathers, 11 D-grade spirit stones for another 66 million. And then the ant parts, the heart-eating blood ant materials, genuinely rare research-grade stuff, and here I did something that surprised the fat man enough to crack his act. I didn't sell them. I told him to pass the research materials to the human race, for free, and I handed over a live ant emperor gonad as a gift on top of it, and when he tried to pay me, I waved it off. Some things shouldn't have a price tag when your own species is the one clawing up from the bottom. Bao Fu looked at me for a second with the act completely gone, and whatever he saw, he liked. When I mentioned offhand that the lucky trio of items I was holding was worth around 100 billion, he didn't try to cheat me by a single coin. You want to know who a rich man really is? Watch how he treats the kid who doesn't know the prices yet. This one passed. He gifted me principal tier authority to the Wanbao Tower's archives before I left, which is how I spent the tail end of my trial week doing homework instead of sleeping, kept awake by tea so expensive it was basically a controlled substance. I read our whole history. 800 years of humanity clawing from near extinction up to race number 1098, vassals to the black tortoise, and buried in the clear records, a splinter I couldn't stop touching with my tongue. The 6th fastest human ever to reach the tower's 10th floor was flagged in cold archive text as traitor to the race 300 years ago. A masked SSSS human, a man who by every right should have been that century's era master and humanity's shield, who had instead betrayed his own kind. No name, no face. Just the label and the shape of a wound the records were built around avoiding. Somewhere far above me, a shadow I'd later learn to call the boss let me peek at exactly that much and no more, keeping me curious, keeping me hungry, the way you rattle a locked door in front of a smart dog to make it want inside. It worked. I wanted inside. File the traitor away with everything else I was collecting this week. It's a long fuse and it's still burning. The last thing I looked up was the heavenly ranking, the board that ranks every trial taker across every race this cycle. And there, at number 1, was a name that made 300 laughing classmates a distant memory. Tao, F Talent, SSSS, 7 hours 3 minutes, sitting on top of the entire tower like I'd been put there as a prank on the natural order. Below me, the real monsters, a dragon prodigy called Ember 7 at 2, a phoenix at 3, a kunpeng at 4, and at number 7, a human SSS talent, a princess named Yi Yi, the girl the human race had quietly been counting on to be this century's actual era master before an F-rank nobody fell out of the sky and took her spot on the board. Baby-faced girl, private little smile. Yes, that one. We'll get there. And at number 8, a black tortoise, which mattered because the dragon clan, furious, proud, and unwilling to let a mystery sit on top of their prodigies, had already made a decision about me. They dispatched one of their own down to my home city of Jiangnan to collect the strange F-rank up close. A Jiao dragon with an old grudge against humans and a well-earned reputation for flooding cities that annoy him. His name was Jiao Lei. He was, as far as the dragon clan was concerned, a disposable pawn sent to poke a curiosity. He was about to descend on the exact place where my mother lived, while I was still a tower away, wrapping up my homework. I closed the archives. My trial week was ending. The tower gathered me up to send me home a very different person than the one it had swallowed off a playground 7 days and 1 whole life ago. I went home to Jiangnan, and Jiangnan, it turned out, was about to have a very bad afternoon. The tower set us all back down exactly where it had scooped us up. The same playground, mid-morning light, 300 kids blinking like they'd woken from the same dream. Except this dream had a body count everywhere else. That's the thing about the novice trial, nobody puts on the recruitment posters. Not everyone comes back. Classes lose kids every year. It's normal. It's expected. My class lost nobody. Class 23, all present, all breathing, 0 casualties, a thing that had, our homeroom teacher would later be quietly informed, never happened before in the history of the trial. Old Joe, our teacher, counted heads twice and then had to sit down on the steps. He didn't know why. He couldn't know that the boy standing in his row had bought the entire human race a survival buffer that had wrapped around his own classmates first and thickest. And he was told, gently, by people with authority, not to make a fuss about it. Let it stay quiet. Let the reason for it stay quiet a while longer. Someone upstairs was building something out of me, brick by brick, and a miracle nobody could explain was one of the bricks. Weijun hit me like a cannonball made of relief. He'd come back an S talent with an SS rating. My round, snack-loving best friend had turned into a genuine tank, an overlord-class bruiser with a health pool north of 43,000, which meant that in a straight fight he could now soak a beating that would delete most awakened adults and just stand there asking if that was all. He was so happy he was crying and pretending it was allergies. I let him have the allergies. That's what you do. Then Mei Song found me. You have to understand, before the trial, Mei Song was the quiet beauty of the year, a light attribute talent, soft-spoken to the point of shyness, the kind of girl who apologizes to door frames she bumps into. She came back an S talent and about 40% less shy, and she walked straight up to me in front of everyone and offered me, in plain words, everything she had, herself, her family's backing, her future, all of it, laid at my feet with her chin up and her hands shaking. It was brave. It was genuinely brave, and I respected it too much to be soft about it, because being soft about it would have gotten her killed. Because here's what I already knew that she didn't. I now had a black tortoise tracking mark, a Dragon Clan curiosity problem, and a target painted on my back the size of a continent. Anyone standing close to me was standing in a blast radius. So I looked at the bravest thing a shy girl had ever done, and I said no, cold and clean, the way you'd pull someone back off a ledge by being harsh instead of gentle. Come back when you're strong enough to stand next to me instead of behind me, I told her, and I heard the echo of Song Yu in my own mouth as I said it, and hated it, and said it anyway. She didn't crumble. Her eyes went hard and bright, and she filed it away as a goal instead of a rejection, which told me everything about what she'd become if she lived. Good. Live first. We'll talk later. And then Zhao Kai opened his mouth. Zhao Kai was my year's designated rival, an A-talent, rich family, the specific brand of handsome that comes preloaded with a sneer and a lifelong resentment of me that the trial had done nothing to cure. He came back stronger and meaner, and when he saw Mei Song humiliate herself over the garbage rank, something in him curdled, and he reached for the one thing he knew would hurt. He didn't insult me. He insulted my mother, said something about the F-rank single mom and what she must have done to raise a son who I don't actually remember deciding to move. 1 second he was talking, and the next, my hand was already coming back from his face and he was on the ground, and my palm was glowing with bone-melting palm, the defense-eating poison technique, an inch from his chest and closing, and old Joe had both arms locked around me and was shouting my name from very far away. Here is the one rule of me, the load-bearing one. My mother is my reverse scale, the one scale on a dragon that you do not touch. Everything else I can take with a smile. Money, insults, 300 people laughing, a god's ghost calling me a child. Fine, all fine, roll it right off. Say one word about the woman who spent 18 years walking into death every spring so I could eat, and I will forget entirely and instantly that I am trying to be a good person. Old Joe held on until my hand stopped glowing. Zhao Kai lived. That was old Joe's doing, not mine. I want to be honest about that. On my own, I don't think I stop. I went home before I did something the teacher couldn't undo. Home was the same tiny apartment and the best cooking smell in the world, because I cook, and I'm good at it, and I had a mother to feed. Sushian, F talent, on paper. A primary school teacher, on paper. The kind of beautiful that made people call her the frost flower behind her back because she never let anything past her face. She took one look at me walking in the door, not the news, not the broadcasts, just my face, and said, calm as still water. So it was you. Number one. Not a question. She'd known before I said a word. She always knew things she had no F-rank way of knowing, and she'd say them in that flat, quiet voice and then ask if I'd eaten, and for 18 years, I'd assumed that was just my mom being my mom. Standing in the doorway that night, freshly SSSS, freshly aware of how the world's power actually stacked, I looked at my F-rank mother reading me like a page and felt, for the first time, a small cold question open up in the back of my head. Who are you really? And where did my father go? And why do you never ever seem afraid? I didn't ask. You don't interrogate the person who kept you alive. You feed her. I put a fox coat around her shoulders and a mountain of trial food on the table, and I fed her. Wei Jin's parents came over, because our two families have been one family since before either of us was born. Wei Dong and Zhao Hua, Uncle Wei and Auntie Zhao to me, a jolly fat man and a sharp-tongued woman, small business owners as far as the neighborhood knew. As far as the neighborhood knew. What I could see now, with eyes that had spent a week learning to read power, was that Uncle Wei and Auntie Zhao were nothing of the sort. They were war kings, hidden monsters wearing aprons, easily the strongest people I'd ever stood in a kitchen with, and they were terrified of my mother. Politely, warmly, bone-deep terrified, the way you're careful around someone who once did you a kindness so large you'll never finish paying it. I caught the shape of it in a look that passed between them and her. My vanished father had, at some point, saved both their lives. That was the debt. That was why the strongest people in the room deferred to the Frostflower teacher pouring the tea. I filed it away with everything else, and I gave my brother his presents. I put the melting gold sunset blade in Wei Jin's hands, the SS artifact I couldn't lift yet that he could, and the Gale Sword Soul Certificate, and the lucky trio worth 100 billion, and half the food, and a coat for his mom to match mine. He tried to refuse. I told him that sworn brothers who were promised to each other before birth do not get to refuse each other's gifts, that it's basically in the contract, and he laughed so hard he cried again and blamed the allergies again, and for one dinner, the whole grieving, plotting, dangerous world went quiet, and it was just 2 families and a warm table and enough food for once. That was the last quiet hour Jiangnan got, because that was when the sea stood up. The sky over the city went the color of a bruise, the ocean pulled back from the shore like something enormous had inhaled, and a voice rolled across all of Jiangnan at once, vast and cold and amused. Hand over the human called Tao, or Jiangnan drowns. Zhao Lei had arrived to collect his curiosity. And I was sitting at a dinner table with everyone I loved, directly underneath him. The city's official defenders went up first, and the city's official defenders went down first. Commander Sikong Zhen, the man who ran Jiangnan's whole military garrison, and the principals of the local academies, real power by human standards, the people you'd call if a building needed saving. Zhao Lei swatted them out of the sky like a man clearing cobwebs off a doorway. Not even cruelty, just scale. That's what the races want us to feel every time in our bones, that our strongest is their footnote. Then Uncle Wei and Auntie Zhao took their aprons off. I have never seen anything like it, and I hope I get to see it again. The jolly fat man and the sharp-tongued woman rose up over Jiangnan as the dusk drum and the morning bell, 2 hidden war kings finally cutting loose, and for a few glorious minutes they actually pushed a Zhao dragon back. Zhao Lei stopped clearing cobwebs and started fighting. And when a proud dragon has to actually fight, a proud dragon gets petty. He burned his own lifespan to reach for a forbidden technique, hauling the entire EC up into the sky to drop on the city as one continent-sized wave, drown the whole board rather than lose the game. Auntie Zhao, hovering there with the sea about to fall on all of us, did the bravest thing I saw that whole day. She laughed at him. She reminded him loudly in front of everyone about the last time a dragon threw this exact tantrum, the old story, the one every kid half knows, a place called Shentang Pass 80 years ago, a dragon who flooded it out of spite and got personally, publicly, humiliatingly broken over it by a man with a third eye. She called Zhao Lei a slow learner. She dared the sea to fall. It started to fall, and 2 things caught it. The first was the black tortoise, a shell the size of a hill unfolded across the sky. Jin 12, a black tortoise noble, the landlord whose clan holds humanity's deed, and he braced under the wave and took it on his back, not to save us. Never think it was to save us. I owned a black tortoise tracking mark. I was, in the most literal legal sense, black tortoise property now, and you do not let a rival clan drown your property before you finish squeezing it. He saved Jiangnan the way you'd yank your own wallet out of a fire. I noted it. I noted it very carefully, because a landlord that possessive was a landlord I was eventually going to have a problem with. And the second thing that caught the wave was an eye. It opened in the sky over the city, a single vertical eye, calm and enormous and ancient, and the instant it opened, the ocean forgot how to fall. Zhao Lei, who had faced down war kings without blinking, took one look into that eye and came apart. All the scale, all the pride, all the contempt drained out of him in a heartbeat and left something small and shaking in the shape of a dragon because he recognized it. Everyone old enough recognized it. The third eye from the Chentang Pass story, the heavenly eye, Ye Fei, the current era master, the single strongest human alive. The one we get once a century, and this century's had come early, and I would learn within the hour that he was also the shadow I'd been calling the boss, the one who'd emptied the human market for me, fed me the trader's file one taste at a time, and been quietly building a legend out of a garbage rank kid all week for reasons entirely his own. He didn't kill Zhao Lei. He did something worse for a dragon. He made it small in front of everyone, pinned him out of the sky, broke his horns, left him bloodied and kneeling and thoroughly alive to carry the lesson home, and when Jin 12 threw himself in the way to shield the dragon, taking a beam from that eye across his own cracking shell, Ye Fei let him, because letting the 2 proudest clans in the tower grovel together in the same sky was the entire point. This was not a rescue. This was a negotiation, and the humans watching were the audience, and I was the merchandise. The clans wanted to talk about me. Specifically, they wanted me controlled. The Dragon Clan said it out loud, and the phrase they used went straight into my bones. He must not be allowed to become like that one. That one, 300 years ago. The traitor to the race. They looked at an F rank with an SSSS rating and a hidden depth none of them could read, and the thing they were afraid of wasn't that I'd stay weak. It was that I'd get strong and pick a side that wasn't theirs. So the Black Tortoise, my gracious landlord, offered a menu of solutions, and the menu was a list of brands. They called them the Xuan Seals. My mother, sitting calmly at our dinner table with a fox coat on her shoulders, explained each one to me in her flat, quiet teacher's voice as if she were reading a grocery list she'd written herself. And the fact that my F-rank primary school teacher mom knew the black tortoise's most closely guarded slave marks by heart was one more brick in a wall I was starting to be genuinely afraid to finish building. There was the Xuanwu seal, which would make me worship the clan as gods, the Xuanjun seal, which would make me a slave who died the instant he thought about betrayal, the Xuantian seal, master and servant, a mind under permanent watch, and the softest one, the mystic spirit mark, A rank, monitor only, a leash that could see where I was, and nothing more. Ye Fei refused the first three without discussion. A god that eats your will, a collar that kills you for a thought, not for his merchandise. But the mark, the toothless one, the one that only watched, that one he allowed. And I understood, watching him allow it, that I was not being protected by the era master. I was being invested in. Because then he showed me what the mark was really for, and it was the coldest, cleverest thing anyone had ever done to me. He put it to a vote, mine, in front of everyone. He arranged for the whole confrontation to be broadcast live to every human on the planet, the same 8 billion I'd bought a week of survival for without their knowing, and he announced that the human called Tao would take the black tortoise's mark willingly for the good of the race, or not at all. And then he gave me 3 minutes to decide on camera while the entire species watched. 3 minutes is a long time, long enough for the crowd to turn, because the people watching didn't know I'd saved them. All they saw was a garbage rank nobody being asked to take a small brand to keep a dragon from drowning a city, and hesitating. And humans, when they're scared and they don't have the full picture, are not kind. The feed filled up with it. Coward. Selfish. Let the F rank take the mark. What's he saving himself for? Just do it and save us, you piece of trash. 8 billion people I'd already bled for, cursing my name in real time because I took a breath. Human nature, it turns out, defaults to ugly when it's frightened. I stood there and read 3 minutes of my own species hating me and felt something in me go very quiet and very cold. And my mother leaned over in the middle of all of it and said the thing that I will hear in my head for the rest of my life. You look beautiful when you smile, she said, quietly, just to me, like the whole world wasn't screaming. You've been so serious since you got home. Smile more, my boy. It suits you. That's all. She didn't tell me what to choose. She didn't defend me to the crowd. She just reminded me that I was still allowed to be a person, and not only a decision. And something about that unknotted the cold thing in my chest. I stepped forward with 2 seconds left on the clock, and I smiled, and I looked up at the eye in the sky, at my big brother, the era master who'd built this whole cruel theater, and I said, watch this. The next version of me is going to be very handsome. Then I took the mark for the human clan out loud on my own 2 feet in front of everyone. The feed flipped so fast it gave me whiplash. The exact 8 billion people who'd been calling me trash a heartbeat ago dissolved into tears and worship. He did it for us. He took it for the race. Tao, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The apology scrolling past faster than anyone could have read it. That's what Ye Fei had built. Not a slave with a mark. A martyr with a halo, forged live in front of the whole species out of 3 minutes of their own shame. In one afternoon, I went from the garbage rank the schoolyard laughed at to the name a planet wept over. Somewhere out there, Wei Jin was staring at a screen, realizing the hero everyone was crying about was the brother he'd had dinner with, and breaking down completely. Somewhere Mei Song recognized the set of my shoulders from behind and made a quiet, private vow to get strong enough to make the clans pay for putting a brand on me. And at our dinner table, my mother caught the eye of a dog. There was a creature that had slipped into Jiangnan among the chaos. One of Ye Fei's own agents, sent to watch over me, wearing a borrowed shape, and a name I'd learned was Mei Jin. My F-rank mother looked at Ye Fei's hidden guard beast, and the guard beast flinched and lowered itself like a scolded pup, and I stopped being surprised by my mother that night, and started being a little afraid of how much I didn't know. But the cleverest part was the part I did to the clans, and it was made entirely of the truth. They were watching me too, trying to decide how dangerous I really was, and so I fed their scanners a montage, every statement individually true, arranged to lie. I let them see my 2 brute strength talents, and nothing else. I let them see the flame set doing the work. I let 1 clean sentence hang in the record. Song Yu was careless, all true, all real. And assembled in that order, it painted exactly the picture I wanted them to buy. A lucky F-rank idiot in a god's hand-me-downs who'd fluked his way past a distracted boss. They wrote me off. The dragon relaxed. The turtle relaxed. The officials filed me under F-rank fortunate harmless, and only one man in the whole city didn't buy it, the #1 principal, who'd noticed a certain class with 0 casualties and understood that miracles that size don't happen by accident, and who started very quietly, trying to get close to me. The mark settled onto me, and I checked what it actually did, and I nearly laughed out loud right there under the eye of a terrified dragon. Permanent plus 10% health and defense. That's it. That's the whole leash. The Black Tortoise had branded their most watched slave, and Child of Fortune had turned the brand into a buff. They thought they'd put a collar on me. They'd handed me a free stat and a nation's worth of goodwill and a reputation for being harmless, and they'd done it live, for free, on camera. Is this, I asked the quiet cold thing in my chest, which had gone back to sleep, the treatment they give the chosen one? Yeah, apparently it was. I was starting to believe it. Yefei found me privately after the theater was over, the eye in the sky folding down into a man who looked almost ordinary if you didn't know better. Big brother, I'd called him, half as a joke, and he decided to keep it. He told me he owed me one favor, an open one, no expiration, cash it in for an item, a secret, or a deed, whenever I liked, which from the strongest human alive is the kind of promissory note you frame. He bumped the #1 principle, the one who'd smelled the truth on me, up to A-level authority, and I understood he was building me a network of people whose careers now depended on my success, a follower web I hadn't asked for and would absolutely use, and he told me one more thing because I'd asked him for it. My hometown district, Tongcheng, sat on the old border between the ancient states of Wu and Yue, Songyu's Yue, the one he'd begged to go home to. There was a martyrs' cemetery there, Longjing, up by Westlake, hallowed ground where humanity buries the ones who died for the race. Yi Fei granted me the right to lay Songyu and Alan to rest in it. Let them rest, he said, soon. And there was a weight on the word soon that I didn't understand yet. A hint folded inside a kindness, the way everything with him was folded inside something else. I'd unfold it in a few days, standing at a different grave in the same cemetery, and it would knock me flat. For now, I just nodded and thanked my big brother and thought the hardest part of the week was over. The hardest part of the week was waiting for me at home, and it was 2 lines long. My mother was gone. On the table where dinner had been the night before, there was a note in her neat teacher's hand, and it said 2 things. The first, I've gone to find your father. You're grown now. You don't need me for this part. The second, underneath, smaller. The day after tomorrow is your grandfather's death anniversary. Go to the grave. That was it. 18 years, and she folded herself up into 2 sentences and a fox coat left hanging by the door, and she walked out to go looking for a man who'd been missing my entire life. I'm not going to make it sound braver than it was. I sat down on the kitchen floor, and I came apart for a while. The SSSS rating didn't help. The 24 billion didn't help. The nation weeping my name didn't help. None of the power meant anything against a quiet apartment and a note, because the one thing all of it couldn't do was put my mother back at that table asking if I'd eaten. I'd spent 18 years terrified of the week each spring when she went into a trial and might not come back. And now she'd walked into something so much bigger than a trial, on purpose, alone, and left me the note instead of the goodbye. Weijin found me on the floor and didn't say anything smart, which is how I knew he loved me. He just sat down next to me until I could stand up again, and when I could, we did the thing you do instead of drowning. We thought it through. My mother, F rank on paper, had cowed one of Yefei's own war beasts with a look. My father had saved 2 war kings' lives and then vanished 18 years ago onto the 10,000 races battlefield, the war above the tower's 10th floor, where humanity's real monsters go to hold the line against everything the tower can throw. My parents weren't small. My parents were so far above War King that war kings were afraid of them. And the battlefield my father disappeared onto was reachable exactly one way, up. Clear the tower to the 10th floor, and the road to the battlefield opens. So that became the plan. Not revenge, not glory, not the SSSS on the board. Up, floor by floor, all the way to 10, to the battlefield, to the 2 people who'd bled to keep me soft in a world that eats soft things. My grandfather, I realized, was buried in Longjing, the martyr's ground, which meant he died for the race too, which meant my quiet little family of a primary school teacher and her all-rounder son had martyrs and missing legends stacked behind it like cordwood, and nobody had ever thought to tell me. My mother's note and Ye Fei's folded hint pointed at the same patch of dirt. The grave, the day after tomorrow. Something was waiting there. I could feel it. I stopped crying and started packing. Grief you can carry. You just have to decide to carry it towards something instead of letting it sit on you. I decided. 2 days. Then the grave. But 2 days is a long time when you're a newly minted national hero with a fresh fortune, a grieving best friend, and a rival whose entire family still hadn't learned to leave me alone. And before the grave, the world had a few more things to settle with me. The universe settled some of them on its own, and this is where I have to tell you about the curse, or the blessing. It depends entirely on whether you've made me angry. Child of Fortune has a line of flavor text I'd skimmed past on day 1. Those who oppose me will not come to a good end. I'd read it as decoration. It is not decoration. Jin 12, the black tortoise who'd saved Jiangnan to protect his property, whose clan had branded me, had 18 prized grandsons, the 18 princes, the whole future of his line, and within days, every single one of them died on a floor 20 boss's backlash, all at once, wiping out his dynasty and clawing back the realm rewards his rise had been built on. And Zhao Lei, the dragon who'd tried to drown my city, had a beloved son named Ao Bing, gravely hurt, and Zhao Lei moved heaven and earth to find the one rare medicine that could save him, the heavenly crystal marrow, and raced home with it clutched in his claws, and arrived to find Ao Bing had died a moment before he got there. Nobody connected any of it to the harmless F rank in Jiangnan. Why would they? It's just luck. It's always just luck. My luck. I didn't lift a finger. I don't even know that I approve, but I've stopped feeling sorry for people who reach for my mother's name or my city's throat because the universe has apparently appointed itself my collections agency, and it does not do partial payments. The lighter days were lighter. Wei Zhen moved into my apartment so I wouldn't rattle around it alone. His own childhood had been a big empty house with 2 absent War King parents in it, and I'd been the only company he ever had, so he knew exactly what an empty home does to you, and he wasn't going to let mine do it to me. And then, because grief needs something stupid to push against, we got rich in the most ridiculous way 2 teenagers can. Wei Zhen discovered his family had quietly upgraded him to a B-level gold card with a 10 million a year limit and lost his entire mind. Suits, a mount, a matte black war wagon he insisted on fueling with actual F-grade spirit stones like a man lighting cigars with cash. He strutted around calling himself a big shot until I got tired of it and showed him my own card. 24 billion, real, liquid, spirit stone billions. He went so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Call me Guy, I told him. Big brother, and today's on me. Then I transferred him 500 million just to watch his soul briefly leave his body. The kid who'd counted rabbit pelts that morning was buying his brother a fortune by that evening, and I let myself enjoy it because you're allowed to enjoy things even the same week your mother leaves. Maybe especially then. Graduation came fast, and graduation in a world run by a tower means one thing. The academies come shopping. Every graduate gets a new bracelet, and the bracelet carries the recruitment offers, and there are 6 academies worth the name. The Imperial Capitals, which is Ye Fei's own and sits under his protection. Jiangnan's, the rich one. Zhongzhou's, ancient and famous for forging. Shijiang, out west, for special attribute talents. Lingnan, all technology and artillery. And Chongqing, up on the old wall, for the ones who just want to fight. Kids fight for a single offer from any one of them. I got all 6. Every academy on the continent, bidding for the F-rank nobody, which is the kind of sentence I could have used a week ago to make 300 laughing classmates choke. Mei Song, light attribute, got routed to Shijiang for her special talent, and she found me at the graduation and quietly, fiercely, asked me to come there too. It cost her something to ask twice after I'd been cold the first time. I didn't answer with a yes or a no because I already suspected where I was going and it wasn't Shijiang, and I wasn't going to make her a promise I'd break. Zhao Kai, meanwhile, was having a much worse graduation than me. His family's fortune had been sunk in a shopping mall that turned out to sit directly over the epicenter of Zhao Lei's flood and quake, and the Zhao Empire was bleeding out. Funny that. The universe's collections agency, taking an interest. He didn't know to be afraid yet. He would. The #1 principal cornered me before I could pick, and he'd earned a hearing, so I gave him one. He laid it out straight, A-level authority to A-level candidate. Being a known prodigy is dangerous in a very specific way, he said. There are race traitor hunters in the world, humans who sold out to the clans, and they make a point of killing exposed young talents before they can grow into threats. It ties back, he said, lowering his voice, to that old wound, the traitor to the race from 300 years ago. The reason humanity is twitchy about its own geniuses, and my shiny new mystic spirit mark made me trackable, which meant the single safest place for me was the one academy sitting inside Ye Fei's own shadow, with General Track and King Track programs and an Era Master's protection wrapped around the whole campus, the Imperial Capital. He also, because he was a good storyteller and could see I was hungry for it, finally told me the whole Zhao Lei myth, the real shape of the Chentong Pass story. How Zhao Lei's son, Ao Bing, an SS talent, had been crippled long ago by a boy named Erlong. How Zhao Lei had flooded the pass in fury. How Erlong had given his own flesh and bone back to his parents to end the feud and then been reborn out of a lotus by his master Sanfeng, coming back with a hidden reincarnation attribute talent. How Zhao Yun and his 3 sons, Yunjia, Mingjia, Erlong, each apprenticed to a different immortal master, had bullied Zhao Lei so far up the tower that he wasn't allowed past floor 39 on pain of slaughter. And how Ye Fei, my big brother, at merely rank 49, had once solo crushed the entire Zhao clan and fought their lord to a standstill and forged the Sky Eye era out of it. The myths I'd half learned as a kid weren't myths. They were personnel files. Every name in the old stories was a live power somewhere in this tower, and I was about to go to school in the middle of them. I picked the imperial capital. Of course I did. It was where the protection was, where the road up was steepest and therefore fastest, and, though I didn't know it standing there, where a certain baby-faced princess from the number 7 slot on the heavenly ranking had already decided she was going. The universe wasn't done arranging my life. It had one more setup to spring, and it was going to spring it on me at my grandfather's grave. But first, Zhao Kai made his last mistake. He couldn't beat me, so he tried to trap me. He hired the Dragon Tiger Gang, a Tier 5 thug outfit run by a bruiser named Liang Bo, to ambush me, film me losing, and use the footage to blackmail Mei Song into dating him. That was the actual plan. Not even a good plan. A plan that required me to lose to Tier 5 hired muscle, which, given my week, was optimistic of him. They caught the 3 of us, me, Wei Zhen, and Mei Song, in a quiet spot they'd picked. And Mei Song proved she'd meant every word about getting stronger by locking half of them down with a light bind, while Wei Jin waded through the rest, like a man wading through tall grass, and I didn't even get my sword dirty. Then the police came, because I'd called them before the fight started. I'm a hero now. Heroes call the authorities. It's very responsible, and it makes the paperwork so much worse for the other guy. And then, I did the thing that actually ended Zhao Kai, and I want to be honest that it wasn't a fair fight, because fairness was never on the menu. I have a best friend with 2 War King parents. Mei Song has a War King grandfather. I have a 24 billion card and a face the whole nation had just finished crying over. I took all of that to a city director named Yu Hong, and I applied it calmly, like leverage is supposed to be applied. The auditors went into the Zhao family's books, and the books, it turned out, held more than tax evasion. They held quiet dealings with race traders, the exact kind of rot the number 1 principal had just warned me hunts prodigies for the clans. The Zhao Empire didn't shrink. It ceased. Zhao Kai went to prison on conspiracy charges, his family's name scrubbed off every building it had been carved into. Here's what I learned, and it's not a nice lesson, but it's a true one, and I'd rather hand you the true one. There is no fairness in this world. There's only strength and what you choose to do with it. A weaker me would have been blackmailed. A kinder me would have let Zhao Kai off with a slap and watched him come back meaner. I am neither of those. When something reaches for the people I love, I don't trim the branch. I take out the root. Zhao Kai insulted my mother in a schoolyard, and it cost him everything he had, and I have not lost a single minute of sleep. Some people you forgive, some people you file with the universe's collections agency. Mei Song kissed me that night. Quick, brave, terrified, and completely her. She'd fought beside me instead of behind me for the first time, and she'd earned the nerve. I didn't pretend I felt nothing, because I'm not a liar, and she deserved better than a lie. But I told her the same true thing as before, gentler this time. Not yet. Get strong. Become someone who can stand in the blast radius and not get hurt. A war king in her own right. And then we talk, as equals, with no one able to use her against me. She didn't cry. She nodded like I'd handed her a training schedule. I keep telling this girl to go get stronger, and she keeps treating it as a dare instead of a rejection, and one of these days it's going to make her terrifying, and I'm going to deserve it. The next morning, I went to the grave. Longjing Cemetery sits up above West Lake, terraced into the green hills, and it is not an ordinary graveyard. It's martyrs' ground. The humans buried there died for the race, and the whole place hums with a quiet weight, like a library where all the books are people. I brought Song Yu and Alan with me, because a promise is a promise, and this was the ground Ye Fei had granted them. The old Yue soil Song Yu had begged to lie in. A pale, quiet swordsman was there when I arrived, a man the handbook flatly refused to read, which by now I understood meant far, far above your level, don't embarrass yourself, who gave his name as Wu Jun, and, without being asked, helped me dig. We laid the noblewoman and the slave boy she'd freed into the earth side by side, 520 years after an ant emperor took her a single step from his arms, and I carved the stone myself. I'm not going to tell you what I wrote on it. Some things you don't say out loud, and some things you don't repeat, even after you've written them down. But the promise was paid. Song Yu went home. The best man I ever met is resting in the ground he asked for, next to the woman who taught him he was worth protecting. I stood there a while. The tombkeeper, an ancient hunched elder named Gao, who moved like the hills themselves, watched me do it and said nothing, and something in his silence felt less like a stranger's and more like a witness's. Then I went to find my grandfather's grave, and the setup the universe had been building all week finally sprang. My grandfather's name was Lin Heng, and his grave, when I found it, held a gift waiting for exactly one person, a 3rd flame god heart shard, fire attack plus 100, sitting in the stone like he'd known his grandson would come collect it one day. 3 of 7 now. A dead man I'd never met, reaching across a grave to arm me. My quiet little family kept getting less quiet the deeper I dug. And then a voice behind me said my name like it had ownership of it, and I turned around, and there was a girl beaming at me like I was a present she'd been promised at birth. Princess Yi Ye Yue, number 7 on the heavenly ranking, the human SSSS talent. The whole race had been quietly counting on to be this century's era master before I fell out of the sky and took her spot. A genuine prodigy, heart of Yaochi, all stats up 256%, the real thing. To the rest of the world, she was a terror. A little demoness who made grown talents nervous and tormented poor Wei Zhen on sight. To me, apparently, she was my childhood betrothal, arranged before either of us could walk, and she had been waiting a very long time to collect. She attached herself to my side with the confidence of a woman cashing a very old promissory note, and I, who had faced down a Jiao dragon that week without flinching, had absolutely no idea what to do with her. Her father came with her. Ye Cheng, an imperial capital heavyweight, and the tomb keeper's silence suddenly made sense. My grandfather's own prized disciple, Wu Jun, the pale swordsman who'd helped me bury Song Yu, turned out to be Ye Cheng's driver, which tells you exactly how far above me this family floated when their chauffeur outranked most of a city. Elder Gao, the ancient tomb keeper, greeted Ye Cheng as an old comrade and called my grandfather Old Lin with the roughness of a man who'd fought beside him. My grandfather Lin Heng had been someone, a master with famous disciples, buried in martyr's ground, leaving god shards in his tombstone for a grandson he'd never seen, and my father was his son, and my mother had cowed a war beast with a look and walked off to find that father on a battlefield above the 10th floor. I stood at my grandfather's grave with a dead god's heart in one hand and a beaming princess on my arm and a family tree that turned out to be made entirely of hidden mountains, and I understood two things clearly for the first time. 1. I came from somewhere. The garbage rank nobody was never a nobody, I just hadn't been told yet. 2. Everyone I needed to reach, my mother, my father, the truth about all of it, was up the tower. And Princess Yi, cheerfully informing me that she was of course going to the Imperial Capital Academy, the exact one I'd already chosen, was the universe's final, unsubtle nudge that the next stage of the climb wasn't going to be a solo trip. The next time the tower opened, I wouldn't be a scared kid drawing an F rank on a playground. I'd be going in on purpose, with a princess and a brother at my back, aiming for the second floor and everything above it. And the second floor, it turned out, belonged to the exact clan of giant turtles that had branded me and drowned nothing and owned my deed. Which was convenient. I'd been looking for somewhere to start collecting. So let me tell you about the day I walked into the Black Tortoise clan's mine and decided to keep it. The second floor of the tower is called the original mining layer, and it is exactly as thrilling as it sounds. No island, no bosses waiting on thrones. Just ore. Endless veins of it. F grade up to SS. The raw source of every metal the whole tower runs on. And your trial is to dig. Complete a mining quota for your talent level. Move up. That's it. That's the floor. For the average F-rank kid who barely survived the island, the second floor is a spa day. You go in, you dig your 1,000 rocks, you pass, nobody dies who isn't asking for it. And the instant I stepped through, the floor found the one way to personally insult me. Every vein carries a domain, and I'd walked into the one called Skill Seal, which, for a normal novice, is the best possible draw. It doesn't hurt you, it doesn't burn you, it just switches off everybody's skills, so the playing field goes flat and raw. Ordinary kids laugh when they get it. Me, I looked down and watched my entire arsenal go gray. Starfire undying, gone. Prairie fire, gone. The fire on my sword, snuffed out. Every clever combo I'd built out of 10 dead races on the island, every single one, locked behind a wall. The one domain in the tower designed to be harmless had reached in and taken away everything that made me me, and handed me back a stick and a mining assignment. Cool. The universe gives with the left hand and files a grievance with the right. Except here's the thing about being built the way I'm built. They took my skills. They forgot to take my luck. My mining quota came up F rank. Dig 100 each of 10 kinds of the cheapest ore, and I'd been dreading exactly this, because to reach the top SSS rating, I'd have to grind up the whole ladder. 1,000 F rocks, 1,000 E rocks, on, and just reading the numbers gave me a headache. So I was walking toward the mine, sulking about it, when I tripped over something. I looked down. It was ore, exposed, undug, sitting in the open wilderness where no ore has any business being, a B-grade blazing copper vein chunk that 100 miners had somehow walked past. Because of course it was. I have maxed luck. Tripping over treasure isn't an event for me, it's a commute. I had no tools yet, which meant my odds of successfully mining a B-grade rock with my bare hands were a rich, insulting 0.1%. And I pulled it out of the ground like a radish on the first try, and the moment it hit my palm, Child of Fortune upgraded it 1 grade to A rank sinking silver iron. Now let me tell you what that rock was worth in mining math, because it reactivated the coin-counting kid in me all over again. 1 A-grade ore converts to 100 B-grade, a B converts to 100,000 F. So the single rock I'd tripped over, before I'd officially clocked in, was worth something like 10 billion of the F-grade pebbles I'd been assigned to grind for. My entire F-rank quota and my E-rank quota, and most of the ones above, all sitting in one hand because I stubbed my toe. The grind I'd been dreading was already half over by accident. I stood there grinning at a rock like an idiot, which is when about 80 pairs of greedy eyes swiveled toward the shiny thing in my hand. I hadn't even entered the mine and I was already getting mugged. A big parrot dropped out of the sky first, some C-grade iron wing thug, cawing about how the lucky kid had A-grade ore and it wouldn't be polite, and to everyone watching I looked like a paralyzed newbie too scared to even pocket his loot. I let it think that. I let it commit to the dive, the same way I'd let a bull commit to a river a floor ago, and at the last second I wasn't there, and the parrot introduced its face to the ground at full speed, invisible sword to its neck. Death, or subjugation. It thought about being brave for exactly as long as it took to see its own health bar, and then it decided it had always wanted to serve me. The rest ran, and running was their mistake, because there was only one direction to run, into the mine, which made a nice straight line of fleeing snacks for a man whose movement speed clears 700 meters a second. I ran them down, and I did not kill the useful ones. I crippled them to a sliver and made them choose death or subjugation. Rock turtles at the back tried to hide in their shells, and I want to be very upfront about my one bias in this life. I hate turtles. I have a professional, personal, freshly branded reason to hate turtles, which we're going to get to. The turtles did not enjoy meeting me. By the time the dust settled, I had 57 brand new loyal servants, 1 A-grade Icefire Demon Owl I promptly started using as a flying mount, 7 Bs, 18 Cs, 31 Ds, kneeling in a field. Having learned that the harmless F-rank was a category error, I did not for 1 second believe they were actually loyal. 57 creatures who'd knelt to me at sword point would put a knife in my back the instant it profited them, and I knew it, and I was fine with it, because I didn't need their love. I needed their pickaxes. The one person in that field who wasn't a hostage was a human. A kid, round-faced, bowl-cut, 1 strand of hair sticking up like an antenna, the single most trusting face I have ever seen on something that survived a tower, who'd actually shouted at me to run when the mugging started, trying to save a stranger out of pure reflex. The handbook read him and nearly made me choke. S-rank Thunder Talent, a Heaven's Wrath Thunder Mage, the genuinely rare lightning kind that the human race grooms like royalty. His name was Si Kong Ting, and he turned out to be the nephew of Commander Si Kong Zhen, the same commander Jiao Lei had swatted out of my city's sky, a high clan prodigy with 0 cunning, wandering a mining floor being nice to strangers. In this tower that's basically a personality disorder, and I found it completely disarming. When he shyly asked my name, I told him a name's just a label. He'd know it when he was meant to. And I watched him do the math later, 4 clues clicking together, and land on it. The F-rank who stood up for humanity in Jiangnan, the first SSSS in 900 cycles. The antenna on his head practically stood at attention. I told him to stick with me, and I'd get him through his S-rank quota. His whole family had written me off as a limited growth fluke. The kid took 1 look at my actual speed and unwrote it on the spot. I liked him. I decided to keep him too, but the way you keep a little brother, not the way you keep 57 pickaxes. Then I read the room I'd walked into, and the room turned out to be a slave state. The Moyu mining area wasn't just a dig site, it was a fiefdom. Down in the tunnels, hauling ore with dead eyes were mine slaves, creatures who'd once been proud trial takers and had gambled on seizing this place and lost. And losing here doesn't mean you go home. It means you become furniture. There was an S-rank Jiao dragon down there, a genuine dragon, pushing ore carts 100 years after its failed rebellion. There was the section manager, a King Kong magic ape, an A-grade elite who tried to take this mine 400 years ago, failed, been enslaved, and clawed his way back up to overseer with a whip in his hand. A man who'd survived by making sure nobody else ever succeeded where he'd failed. That's what the second floor actually is, under the spa day surface, a machine for turning ambitious geniuses into livestock. Because there's only one way to get the SSS rating here, and it isn't digging, it's conquest. To top clear this floor, you have to take the whole mine, enlist a crew, free and flip the mine slaves into soldiers, kill the section managers, kill the supreme executive officer sitting at the center, and then, last and worst, suppress your own allies when they inevitably turn on you the moment the throne's in sight. 5 steps. Most of the floor's death toll comes from geniuses dying somewhere in those 5 steps, and the 10,000 races have a nickname for the whole ritual, the Genius Courting Death Competition. I was absolutely going to enter the Genius Courting Death Competition. I'd made up my mind before I understood the rules. But the King Kong magic ape, watching my 57-headed parade roll in and correctly reading me as trouble, said one more thing to the whole mine, a warning meant to keep the peace, that this particular mine had been seized and held for the last 30 years by an SS rank prodigy of the Black Tortoise clan, that its defenses were among the best on the entire floor, that ambitious miners should think very hard before ruining themselves. Black Tortoise, my gracious landlord, the clan that branded me on live television and stamped their little mark into my soul, the clan whose noble had saved my city to protect his property. This whole mine, every ore vein, and every enslaved dragon was theirs. I stopped being able to hide my smile. I hadn't come to the second floor to dig 1,000 rocks. I'd come looking for somewhere to start collecting what the turtles owed me, and they'd gone and left a mine lying around with their name on it. All right, I told Si Kongting, who had no idea what he'd signed up for. Change of plans. We're not passing this floor. We're taking it. There was one problem with that plan, and it was the size of the whole floor. My skills were sealed. You take a mine by force, and force was exactly the thing this domain had switched off. Except I'd noticed something on the island that the domain's designers apparently hadn't accounted for, and I went to test it on the meanest thing in the neighborhood. The richest ore zone in the mine was held by 2 clans of A-grade bruisers, big anaconda folk and spiky crocodile folk who'd been strangling anyone who wandered near their patch. I walked up and told them to get out. They offered to let me join them, which was generous, and I declined, which was rude, and then the lead serpent decided I should die. 5 A-grade powerhouses came at me at once. And I quietly put away the invisible Chengying sword, drew the old A-grade flame spirit sword I'd retired a floor ago, and said the 4 words the domain swore I couldn't. Flame dragon's wrath, devour them. The dragon came out of the blade. Here's the loophole, and it's a beautiful one. The skill seal seals your skills, the ones that live in you. It cannot touch a special ability that lives in your equipment. The domain switched off my starfire and my prairie fire, but the fire dragon sleeping in my sword had never been my skill. It was the sword's, and it does not care what floor it's on. 5,000 burning damage a second swept the whole rich zone, and 5 A-grade powerhouses who'd been kings of this dirt an hour ago went up together because their 10,000 health each could not survive a thing that outputs 50,000. The best part, the part that made me forgive Flame Dragon's wrath every rabbit pelted ever cremated, is that trial takers aren't monsters. The fire that always incinerates my loot can't touch the backpacks of the people I kill. For the first time, my most expensive party trick paid out clean. I picked up 5 packs, 25 A-grade ores, which upgraded to 25 S-grade spirit stones in my hands. My entire mining quota, S-grade and A and B and C Kongtings on top. Done. In one swing. Off the corpses of the people who'd tried to mug the lucky kid, and the whole mine went silent and looked at the floor. Every trial taker who'd watched me delete the local warlords in a single second recalculated their entire life. The A-grade Icefire Owl I was using as a mount felt actual dread for the first time. Only Si Kongting stayed calm, because Si Kongting, bless him, had watched me swap weapons and figured out the trick, and it turned out the trusting kid was no fool about the things that mattered. He wore a full B-grade set with one genuinely elite piece, an A-grade lightning staff that let his basic attacks rain thunder and carried an area nuke of its own, the same kind of equipment special that laughed at the skill seal. The Sekong family had armed their baby prodigy well. I gave him a look, and he gave me a small, proud nod, and neither of us said the quiet part, which was that between his staff and my sword, the domain that turned this floor into a spa day had made exactly 0 difference to either of us. I did one thing that wasn't strategy or wasn't only strategy. I told the whole watching mine that the warlords who'd hoarded the rich zone were dead, and the zone was open. Dig freely, all of you. And the trial takers who'd been scraping for single ores out in the wastes flooded in gratefully, and I posted the Icefire Owl over them, not to mine, but to watch, to report who behaved and who schemed. You want a mine's loyalty, you don't buy it and you don't beat it. You make yourself the reason their day got better, and then you make sure you're the one holding the ledger of favors. 57 pickaxes had become a whole zone of grateful diggers and 1 A-grade informant, and I hadn't paid a coin. I'd just been the strongest thing in the room that also occasionally did something nice. Then Si Kongting and I went deeper, because the shortcut to owning a mine runs through the parts of it that kill people. The S-grade zone was silent as a held breath. No diggers, no warlords. The deep ore is where the mine's native monsters live, and the further in you go, the more likely something eats you. We found the ore anyway, because I have my luck, and Si Kongting, being a lightning kid, could feel the thunder crystal humming in the rock before we saw it. 5 fused chunks of it, and I dug all 5 out and watched Child of Fortune fold them up into a single SS-grade Thunder Source stone, half the SS quota, in one dig. I was starting to think the second floor was going to roll over as easily as the first. The second floor heard me think that, and it woke up the earthworms. Earth dragons, and I use worms loosely, because these were mountain-sized things with mouths like open graves, S grade, over 2,000 attack, and a nasty habit. They live on ore, and when something digs up the ore they're guarding, they come for it with the specific fury of a landlord finding you've moved the walls. One turned into 12, turned into a floor going soft under our feet as they collapsed the ground into sinkholes, trying to drag us under where being strong wouldn't save me, pulled into the dirt, surrounded, suffocated. That's the one thing that could actually kill me down here, and they knew it. I killed the first one with a thrown flying locust stone, 6,800 damage, enough to erase it 5 times over, and then I learned that earth dragons drop refined metal, precious metal, 1 fat ingot per corpse, upgraded by my luck into something worth an S-grade spirit stone apiece. The horde trying to bury us alive was, on closer inspection, a herd of walking bank vaults. My eyes went, I will admit, a little greedy, but there were 100 of them now, and Si Kongting is made of wet paper. So we did a thing I'm proud of, and he cried through. I carved a path. He clung to my back with a lightning shield up, and when the sky over us went black and his A-grade staff called down thunderous might, a full third of the horde stood bolt upright and turned to dust at once. The funniest visual of my week, 100 writhing S-shaped worms all snapping into rigid eye shapes the instant the lightning hit them, ironed flat by the sky. The kid had one real trick, and it was a good one. I threw him bodily out of the encirclement when his health ran dry, took the last of the swarm on my own defense, their 2,000 attacks scratching me for a contemptuous -1, and hauled us both clear of a full-blown mine collapse with about a second to spare. And standing in the settling dust, I stopped feeling lucky and started feeling watched, because none of that had been an accident. 5 oars do not summon 100 guardian dragons. A mine collapse does not wait to trigger until the exact second I'd nearly reached safety. I'd caught a shadow moving on the cliffs at the worst moment, a figure that wasn't mining and wasn't fleeing, a figure that was arranging. Somebody had pointed the entire earth dragon population of this mine at me on purpose, and then hidden to watch it work. I didn't know his name yet. I didn't know he was a ghost out of a genocide the Dragon Clan thought they'd finished 300 years ago. I just knew that for the first time since a playground laughed at an F rank, something in this tower was hunting me with a plan. I filed it, the way I file everything, and then the floor, not done with me, cracked open one more time. Bigger, deeper, the whole valley shaking, and the king of the worms came up to say hello. The Earth Dragon King was an S-grade boss with 30,000 health and 4,200 attack, and it was the first thing I'd met on this whole floor that could actually break my defense. It had a talent called Split, which is the most annoying word in the language. It can shed 10% of its own body as a clone, and treat any clone as its true self, and heal back to full by eating ore, which meant that grinding it down was pointless. Every chunk I carved off it could just become a new one, and every wound it could regrow underground where I couldn't follow. It was, functionally, unkillable by patience, and patience, with my skills sealed, was all I had. So I did the thing you do with a boss you can't outdamage. I studied it. And studying it taught me something that took the wind clean out of me. Under its talent, in the handbook, there was a little red dot I'd never once clicked. I clicked it, and it opened a talent attribute, a bonus power baked into the talent itself, and I sat there realizing that this red dot had been under everyone's talent the whole time. Under Wei Zhen's, under Mei Song's, under Yi's, under Song Yu's. Talents don't just give a grade. The strong ones carry a whole attribute I'd been too busy winning to read, which meant I'd misjudged the most important fight of my life. Song Yu's talent had been SS rank. His talent attribute, whatever it was, had been sitting right there, unread, the day I fought him. I'd thought I beat him. I'd let him die believing, somewhere underneath the honor of it, that I'd earned it. And standing in front of an ordinary mine boss I couldn't scratch, I finally understood the size of what he'd done. He hadn't just held back his skills. He'd been operating an entire dimension of power I hadn't even known existed, and he'd folded it up and set it aside and let a lucky boy put him in the ground because he'd decided the boy was worth losing to. My great victory on the island was a gift wrapped up to look like a fight. The luck theory of success, the tower calls it. You get carried up the mountain and told you climbed it. I owed Song Yu even more than I'd thought, and he was already in the ground and I couldn't tell him, so I did the only thing I could with it. I turned back to the Worm King and decided to actually earn this one. I couldn't kill it. The Split saw to that, and after a dozen frantic exchanges, it burrowed away to lick its wounds rather than die on my sword. But I hadn't really been fighting it. I'd been reading it. And the thing the reading told me was that the Earth Dragon King fought me like it had a grudge, like it was defending something, like it was somebody's. It wasn't a wild monster that had wandered up. It was a guard dog, and a guard dog means an owner. The shadow on the cliff had a pet, and the pet was 30,000 health of living earthquake, and both of them were waiting for me to get tired. I decided not to get tired. I decided to take the whole mine out from under the shadow's feet instead, and force him to come to me on my ground, at my hour, with his skills as sealed as everybody else's. Taking a mine is 5 ugly steps, and I am not going to pretend it was elegant. I gathered an army. the grateful diggers, the flipped mind slaves, Si Kongting and his Sky Thunder, my 57 hostages, and I overcompleted every mining quota the floor could offer because over-delivering stacks the rewards, and I wanted the stack. It paid out fat. A top-tier mining skill, a blueprint for a full A-grade armor set, lucky draw gear I didn't need. The best of it I gave away. I dressed Si Kongting head to toe in Azure Thunder gear and turned the trusting kid with one good trick into a walking lightning god because an ally you arm is worth 10 hostages you threaten, and because I liked him. And quietly, on my own hand, one particular ring drank all the while, the burning silence ring, a thing that banks a cut of every point of fire damage I deal and saves it, silent, patient, filling up through every flame dragon's wrath I threw across that mine until it held over 9 million stored fire, coiled and waiting for one catastrophic release. Remember the ring. It's the last gun on the wall and it goes off soon. Then we marched to the center and I killed the mine's master. He was the supreme executive officer, a titan of the wall of rock, an S-grade boss the last owners had left in charge, the immovable heart of the whole operation. He did not last. 3 swords, and the wall came down, and taking his throne, handed me his talent as a parting gift, immovable as a mountain. S rank, a defense so total it made me exactly the kind of thing that eats mine bosses for breakfast, and the instant his corpse hit the floor and the center changed hands, the whole mine's domain flickered and died, the skill seal lifted. I felt it come back like a held breath finally let out, the fire flooding back onto my sword, starfire waking up in my chest, every combo I'd built out of 10 dead races on the island coming online at once. For an entire floor I'd fought with one hand and won anyway. Now I had both hands back, in a mine I already owned, surrounded by 1,000 trial takers who'd spent the day watching the harmless F-rank do impossible things with his skills switched off. They had no idea what was about to become possible now that they were switched on. And neither, it turned out, did the shadow on the cliff, who took one look at his skills coming back too, decided his own moment had finally arrived, and stepped out of hiding to enslave me. He'd been waiting for the seal to drop so his power would work. He'd forgotten to ask whether mine would work better. His name was An Ming, and the first thing he did was drop a chain on my soul. I felt it settle, soul chain, an S-grade leash that ignores every number you own and just eats 1% of your health a second, patient and arithmetic, until you hit 0 and wake up as its puppet. It doesn't care if you have 1,000 health or 100 million, it counts to 100 and then it owns you. My health started sliding, and I stood there and let it, and asked him pleasantly how he'd found me out. Because he told me he'd been watching through the eyes of mine slaves he controlled, watching the F rank submit a mining quota from the bottom grade all the way to SS, and there was only one F rank in the whole tower who could do that, the famous Tao. He'd been planning me for a long time. And then he retracted the chain at half my health, because, and I want you to appreciate the villain logic here, turning me into a mindless puppet would be a waste. He didn't want a marionette. He wanted a slave who could still think, still fight, still be the strongest arm of his rise. Come into my embrace, he said, arms open, already dreaming of the future where the two of us made every race in the tower kneel. He'd chained my soul as a handshake. He genuinely believed he was paying me a compliment. Then the crowd recognized what he was, and the temperature dropped 40 degrees. And Ming took off his hat, and someone in the mine screamed a name that turned every face murderous. Demon Sound Clan, a cursed race, a soul-eating race the Dragon Clan had led the whole tower in exterminating 300 years ago. A genocide so complete that everyone thought it finished, and a bounty so rich that killing a single survivor could fund you up to War King. The mine surged at him. And Ming, hunted the instant he showed his face, threw out a soul tsunami, a wave that doesn't wound the body, it drowns the mind, and half the crowd clutched their heads and either fell or knelt, their faith cracking, their wills bending into his. He spared my group. He was saving me for the good silverware, because he had one more skill, and it was the one his whole dead clan was famous for, demon sound soul control. Not a chain, a duel, soul against soul, on the battlefield of the mind. Winner takes master, and loser takes slave, and its success rate scales with the gap in your talents. Against an SSS, it barely tips the odds 0.1%, which is why the Demon Sound clan learned the hard way, at the cost of their entire civilization, never to reach for a dragon prodigy's mind. But against an F rank, the skill leans 99% in the caster's favor. And Ming looked at the garbage rank whose soul had somehow shrugged off his first probe, and he had 880 points of soul power and a 99% tilt, and he was certain. Become my most loyal slave, he said, and let us ascend together. And he cast the strongest thing his murdered people had ever made, straight into my head. Here's what he didn't know about me, and it's the whole joke of my life. I am the child of fortune. What I fear least in this world is a probability problem. For Ming, that skill was 99% to succeed. For me, that same skill was 1% to fail, and 1% to fail, in my hands, is a certainty. His power came into my mind like a sledgehammer, and my skull rang, and for 1 second, everything went white. And then the wave that had crashed in like a beast broke against something it couldn't move, and drew back and cowered, and I looked down at the soul power of the last soul mage of a dead race, huddled in the corner of my own mind like a frightened rabbit, waiting to be dealt with. His 99% had rolled my 1. It always rolls my 1. And Ming staggered back, blood at his lips, saying it couldn't be, saying it over and over. Impossible, your soul. How is your soul so strong? It wasn't. My soul was nothing special. I just don't lose coin flips. That's the difference between us that killed him. He trusted his power, and I trust my luck, and on the day those two met, the power lost. When a soul control fails, it recoils on the one who cast it. The hunter becomes the prey. The master becomes the slave. My will closed into a fist around what was left of his. And Ming, proud remnant of a proud dead people, knelt in the dirt of a mine and called me master, and then his memories poured into me, and for just a moment the joke stopped being funny, because I saw what the Demon Sound clan actually was, under the curse and the bounty. When the Dragon Clan came to end them, the elders had done the arithmetic every doomed people eventually does. They sacrificed themselves to buy an escape for the children. They hid a handful of their young in a forgotten wasteland and died covering the retreat, and the survivors grew up in a resource-starved nowhere, living worse than animals, each generation swearing the same vow, that the clan would rise again. Every Demon Sound child coming of age learns to hide their face before anything else. Learns to throw away a perfect score on the first floor rather than land on a ranking board where a dragon might see the name. And Ming had spent his whole life hidden. And the one time he finally showed his fangs, reaching for a future, he reached for the wrong F rank and lost everything exactly the way his ancestors had. The tower didn't make him a monster. The Dragon Clan's genocide did, and then called him one for surviving it. I didn't feel sorry enough to free him. I want to be honest about that. I'm the hero of this story, not a saint, and a soul mage who tried to puppet me does not get to walk away clean. But I felt sorry enough to use him well instead of cruelly, which in this tower is most of what mercy ever gets to be. I made Ming the mine's new supreme executive, the strongest guard boss a sealed floor could ask for. I had him gently wipe the memories of the Icefire Owl and the 2 giant spirit sheep who'd fought honestly beside me, not to hurt them, but because a race everyone's paid to kill only survives if nobody remembers seeing it. And then I set those 3 free with their honor and their SS ratings intact, so that somewhere out there 3 clans would remember fighting alongside a great human and never know his name. And the Earth Dragon King, and Ming's own guard dog, 30,000 health of grudge. I had its own master offer it up, and this time it couldn't burrow, and my sword came down and it turned to stone. Its talent came to me on the wind. Earth Guardian, S rank, plus 320% strength, stacked on top of the immovable as a mountain I'd taken off the wall of rock. In one afternoon, the garbage rank had collected 2 S-grade talents, and the first living Demon Sound slave anyone had held since the massacre. That last part was a secret worth a war. If it ever got out that I owned a Demon Sound survivor, the whole tower would come for me, so I buried it deep with everything else I was carrying up this mountain, and then I held the mine's command seal for 30 minutes and became a god. That's the last step, the one that actually converts a massacre into ownership. Hold the center for half an hour and suppress anyone who thinks the throne should be theirs instead. Nobody thought that. The mine was very quiet by then. The counter ran down, and the tower chimed, and it handed me the SSSS rating and control of the whole Mo-U mining area, 30% of everything it produced, forever. And then Child of Fortune took its little bow, rounded my SSS up to SSSS, the way it always does, and my 30% became 50. A garbage rank kid now owned half the output of a mine the Black Tortoise clan had held for 30 years. The sky heard about it before I'd finished smiling. It shattered like a dropped mirror, and a foot the size of a mountain range came down out of the crack, and a voice like an old god grinding stone asked which junior of which race dared seize its mine. 4 world pillar feet, and then a Zhuan turtle the size of a hill looking down at everything I'd just taken, the SS-grade Black Tortoise prodigy who'd conquered this place 3 decades ago, spending a fortune to send a clone all the way down to the 2nd floor to defend his property in person. His killing eyes swept the mine and found me, and narrowed, and I watched him taste the air. "Human," he said, surprised. "From your body I sense the Zhuan seal of my own clan, a vassal wearing his master's brand, standing on his stolen mine. You truly seek death. Now, I have made my feelings about turtles clear several times this evening, and I'd like the record to show they are consistent feelings, arrived at honestly. This was the clan that had branded me on live television in front of 8 billion people. This was the clan whose noble had rescued my city the way you rescue your own wallet from a fire. And here was one of them, come down in person to tell an 18-year-old to die for the crime of being good at his job. The burning silence ring was still on my hand, and it was full. 9 million stored fire, banked one flame dragon's wrath at a time across a whole day of slaughter, coiled and silent and waiting for exactly one moment worth spending it on. This was the moment. I threw the ring. The flame left my hand small and grew as it flew, and by the time it reached him, it was a second sun, and it took the heaven-propping foot and the hill-sized shell and the ancient grinding voice and folded all of it into one white detonation that dyed the whole mine red. When the light cleared, there was a mushroom cloud where a black tortoise noble's clone had been, and a scatter of dying sparks, and a mine full of trial takers who could not believe that a thing of their own tier had just deleted an SS-grade clan elder's projection in a single throw. I stood in the afterglow, back soaked in cold sweat, because it had been a gamble, and I'd bet everything I'd saved all day on one flung ring, and it had won. I'd killed a turtle. I felt fantastic about the turtle. What I did not feel fantastic about was the fact that, in the half second before the fire took it, the turtle had seen my face. That's the price, and I knew it the moment the cloud went up. The clone was only a clone. Killing it didn't scratch the real elder sitting safe on some floor far above, but the real elder would learn everything the clone had seen. He'd learn a human of the second floor had one-shot his projection. He'd cross-reference the Zhuan seal on my soul, the tracking brand they'd stamped on me themselves, live, on camera, and he'd have my name and my city and my mother's district inside a day. I hadn't just annoyed the landlord. I'd made it personal with the single most powerful clan that holds humanity's deed, and I'd done it while wearing their leash. They couldn't move openly on Blue Star, not with my big brother Ye Fei's eye watching over it, but the traitors they'd planted inside the human race, the exact hidden knives the principal had warned me were already hunting exposed prodigies, those they could point at me anytime they liked. I'd walked onto this floor to start collecting what the turtles owed me. I'd left it having signed my name at the top of their list. Worth it. Ask me again in a month when something's trying to kill me in an alley, and I'll probably say worth it then too. Some debts you pay forward gladly. The tower announced the rest to every human alive. Tau, SSSS on the second floor, and a reward that made a whole species richer. Every human held mine in the tower, output up 10%, cheaper metal and cheaper gear rippling out to 8 billion people who'd never dig an ore in their lives. 2 floors, 2 SSSS ratings, 2 gifts to the race from the F rank they'd once held a funeral for. Somewhere far above, as the cheering started, something enormous stirred, a tremor rolling down from a higher floor, from powers I couldn't see and wasn't ready for, a reminder that this mountain went up a very long way and I was still standing near the bottom of it. I let it go for now. My stamina was almost gone. I sent my crew home, accepted a friend request from a Tiri Si Kongting, the first name in a friend list that had been empty my whole life, and stepped out of the tower. I sorted the spoils at my kitchen table, in the quiet apartment with the note still on it, and 3 of them mattered. The first was armor. A Rock Guardian plate, S-grade, dense as a mountain's root, so much stronger than the Flame Spirit set that had carried me across the island that keeping the old set would have been sentiment, not strategy. So I retired it. It felt like closing a door on the version of me that had walked into Kirishima terrified and F-ranked, and I let it. You don't get up the tower by staying in love with the gear that got you through the first floor. The second was a small thing with a big consequence. A conversion scroll let me move a single trait between weapons, and I peeled the fire splash off the old Flame Spirit sword and set it onto Song Yu's Chengying's sword, so the blade the best man I ever met left me now cut a little wider and a little meaner. His sword, sharpened with my luck, he'd have made a dry joke about that. I made it for him, and the third one stopped my hands. I had an SS grade class certificate I'd been saving, a Gale Sword Soul, the one I'd once earmarked for Wei Zhen before he lucked into his own class. And my magic warrior can eat certificates for growth, so I fed it in, expecting a few stat stars. That's not what came out. The fusion took the Gale Sword Soul and gave me back a skill, SSS rank, and I read its name 3 times before I believed it. Forbidden Wind Surge, Song Yu's technique, the one that had scoured a stone hall down to bare rock and nearly ended me, the one I'd only survived by hiding inside a bug, the single deadliest thing that broken, faithful man had ever wielded in defense of a woman 5 centuries gone, and now it lived in me. I sat at my mother's empty table and I understood finally what he'd meant at the very end, the thing I'd been too raw to hear. He hadn't said win, he hadn't said avenge me. He'd said, the future of the human race is in your hands. Don't sit on a throne over it, carry it somewhere. I couldn't repay him. He was in the ground I'd put him in, but I could carry his sword and his fire and his last technique up a mountain he never got to finish climbing, and I could point all of it at the clans that spend our species like small change. That's not a repayment. It's better than a repayment. It's a continuation. So let me tell you where that leaves the garbage rank they laughed at on a playground 18 years and 1 lifetime ago. I awakened the worst talent in the building and bought 8 billion strangers 2 weeks of not dying. I buried a legend and inherited his ultimate. I walked onto a mining floor as a nobody and walked off it owning half a god clan's mine with their most powerful family swearing a blood grudge against my name. My mother left a 2-line note and walked up a tower to find a father I've never met on a battlefield above the 10th floor that I can only reach one way, by climbing through everything the black tortoise and the dragons and the traitors in our own ranks are about to throw at me. Good. Let them come. I've got a princess who chose my school, a lightning kid who calls me big brother, a soul mage nobody knows I own, a dead friend's sword on my hip, and a mother somewhere up there who told me I look better when I smile. I'm going up to go get her, and the clans I just made enemies of had no intention of politely waiting at the top for me to arrive. The black tortoise moved first, and to my complete surprise, the human race moved back and moved harder than I'd ever imagined it could. Then the knives our own species had quietly grown in the dark started sliding out toward my throat. And after all of that, the tower opened its 3rd floor, and I learned exactly what it feels like to run for your life through a maze that erases itself behind you. Let me tell you how the garbage rank kept climbing. The black tortoise wanted me dead for the mine and the clone, and up on the 69th floor of the tower, a height I can't even imagine yet, they moved to make an example of me. What happened next, I only heard about secondhand, and I still get chills. A human came out of 18 years of silence to answer them. Yuan God, one of our old era masters, a name I'd read in a textbook as ancient history, reappeared and walked into the black tortoise's own saints and killed one of their SSS elders and 5 of their SS elders, not to win a war, but to send a single sentence down the whole tower. Bully our young, and the old ones come down off the mountain. The black tortoise ancestor struck her dead for it. And then she stood back up, because every human alive is carrying the immortal body blessing an F-rank kid bought them on a fog island, and death doesn't stick to us the way it used to. My reward, 2 floors down, reached up 67 floors and resurrected an era master mid-execution. And while the black tortoise ancestor stood there stunned that his kill hadn't taken, something in green shattered his clone-like glass, a presence at the very top of the human race that I didn't have a name for yet, that I wouldn't have a name for until much later, that I'll only tell you about when I've earned the telling. The message landed. Peer fights us fairly, that's fair. But reach down to crush our children, and our monsters will reach back. The black tortoise pulled its open hand off my throat. Jin 12, whose own faction's ancestor was the saint who'd fallen, was ruined all over again because the universe's collections agency does not miss an installment. Even the Jiao clan, Jiao Lei's people, got purged by the phoenix in the shuffle, one more threat swept off my board by a luck I didn't ask for and can't turn off. But the clans that own us are patient, and they'd learned they couldn't touch me openly on Blue Star with Ye Fei's eye on it. So they used the knives they'd grown inside us instead. The race traders, humans who'd sold their souls to the clans, the exact hidden arrow the principal had warned me about. In the weeks before I reported to the academy, one of them came for me. He sprung Zhao Kai's war general parents out of a cell to use as disposable muscle, and ambushed me and Yi Yi and Wei Zhen on a snack street outing, and I want to be fair to the effort, it was a genuinely good ambush, aimed at the 3 of us at our most off guard. It also failed instantly, because in between the floors, I'd turned my mountain of mine loot into a shelf full of new skills, courtesy of a certain fat merchant who was very glad to see me, and I'd stopped being a one-trick fire mage. The muscle went down fast. Then the real assassin showed himself. The mirror dancer. A traitor who could wear anyone's face and split into a crowd of copies, the kind of enemy you can't hit because you can't find him. So I didn't look for him. I filled the street with copies of my own. Cheng Ying's Night Shadow throws shadow clones, and I set a reflect on myself so that the first real blow he landed bounced his own power back into his teeth, and I bait-killed him with his own confidence. He left me his transformation talent on the way out. I can wear other faces now too, that'll matter later. But the mirror dancer was just the glove. The hand inside it was a shadow demon, a War King tier race trader that doesn't wear faces, it wears people, climbing inside a living host and driving them like a stolen car, a thing that had already murdered a human SS talent and 13 S talents and a pile of A-rank prodigies before it ever got to me. It poured itself into a school official named Deputy Gao, sealed us inside a shadow domain where its power ran everything, and it reached for Yi Yi, because a controlled human SSS prodigy is the richest prize in the tower, and Yi Yi, my clingy childhood betrothal, the girl everyone else called a little demoness, did the bravest and most terrifying thing I saw that whole month. She stopped hiding. She let the whole domain see exactly what she was, the number 7 name on the heavenly ranking, a genuine human SSS, the era master the race had been grooming before I fell out of the sky, and she did it on purpose, to make herself too valuable and too watched to kill, to pull every protective eye in the human command straight down onto us. She burned her own secret to shield me. I hadn't known she had that in her. I revised my entire opinion of her in about 1 second, and it's never gone back. Then the little dog that had been shadowing me since the day I took the mark, Mei Jin, Ye Fei's own guard beast, the one my F-rank mother had cowed with a look, stopped pretending to be a dog. It froze the shadow demon solid with a single red stone, and in the gap that bought me, I tore the demon out of its host with a new blade skill and a burst of speed, and the hunter that had killed a dozen prodigies died in a school hallway. And that's when I found out the whole thing had been a test. Not the clan's test, ours, Ye Fei's. My big brother had taken a captured War King traitor, put it on a leash, and pointed it at me and Yi Yi as live bait, with the dog standing by the whole time as a safety net that would never let it actually land the kill. He'd manufactured a monster to temper us against, the way you quench a blade in cold water, because a hero forged on camera still has to be forged for real somewhere the camera can't see. I should have been furious. Mostly I was impressed and a little bit tired because I was starting to understand that my entire life was now a series of pressures applied by a man at the top of the tower who had decided I was worth the effort of breaking and reforging over and over into whatever the human race was going to need. I looked at Yi Yi, shaken, secret spent, still standing, and I told her the truest thing I had. With me here, nothing is going to happen to you. I meant it. I've meant it every day since. Then I reported to the Imperial Capital Academy, and the tower opened its 3rd floor, and I stopped being tested by other people and went back to doing what I'm actually good at, walking into an impossible room and walking out of it first. The 3rd floor was a maze called Infinite Escape, and it wanted to keep me forever. The rules were cruel and simple. 10,000 trial takers dropped into a maze, held in place by pillars of light that release you in order of talent. The SSS prodigies walk free first, and a garbage rank like me gets let off his leash a full 40 minutes after them. A third of everyone dies to traps and lurking monsters. The exits move, and 10 minutes after the last F-rank starts running, they open the cage at the entrance and release the thing that gives the floor its name. A boss built to hunt every straggler in the maze to death. Infinite Escape. What you're escaping is the boss. 99% of the people it isolates, it kills. This cycle's boss was the Hell Demon Dog, a 3-headed monster with an SS rank talent that gave it fire, ice, and wind all at once, 627,000 health, movement speed faster than most people's panic, and a temper. It sat in its cage growling while the whole maze emptied out around me, 10,000 trial takers sprinting off to their 40-minute head start, every one of them delighted to leave the harmless F-rank behind as a nice slow scapegoat for the dog to eat first. I waited until the maze was empty and it was just me and the dog. And then, because I'm not an honorable person when honor would get me killed, I did the rudest thing in combat. I opened with my finisher. I'd spent the emptying maze quietly farming starfire marks off the departing crowd stragglers, so my stack was full. 100 marks, times my magic warrior power, times the fire attack that 3 god shards had bloated past anything this floor was built for. The cage lifted, the dog gathered itself to pounce, and I turned around and detonated Starfire Undying in its 3 faces before it finished standing up. 3,354,600 damage. I did not look back. A true man never looks back at an explosion. Behind me, I'm told, the strongest hunter the 3rd floor had fielded in ages wore an expression of pure betrayed confusion across all 3 of its heads for the half-second it had left. The tower built that dog to chase 10,000 people through a maze, and it met a garbage rank who deleted it before it cleared the cage door. Somewhere in the machinery of the Haoshan Tower, I like to imagine a very old system going, I copied that boss to make your life hard, not for you to one-shot it in the doorway. The dog paid like a dog that size should. Its corpse coughed up 3 of the rarest spirit stones in existence. SSS grade, the kind the whole human race treats as legend, and I now owned more of them than I have fingers. It dropped a pair of hell-forged war boots that made me the eye of a moving firestorm, a fire sparrow necklace, and a heart core that my luck folded up into a 5-element core, an SSS material that fuses fire, ice, wind, thunder, and light into one perfect thing, the exact material you'd forge a god staff out of if the human race had a smith who could forge at that grade, which it doesn't, yet. But the drop that stopped my hands wasn't the god material. It was a small sky blue tablet that didn't even have a grade, the first thing I'd ever picked up that my luck refused to touch, because you can't upgrade something that isn't rated. The UUA plate, class exclusive equipment, and the class it belonged to was Yaochi Immortal Maiden, Yi's class. Her class. Nobody else in the tower could develop it. The maze had handed me, of all people, a divine artifact keyed to my clingy childhood betrothal, the girl who'd burned her own secret to shield me a month ago. I put it away very carefully. Of everything the hell demon dog gave me, that scrap of blue quartz with her name written into its bones was the piece I valued most, and I hadn't even given her a present yet. Now I had one. I'd deliver it later, and it would turn out to be one of the most important things I ever handed anyone, but that's a floor or two ahead. For now, I pocketed a god's staff material, a princess's destiny, and a dead dog's boots, and I went to go do the part of the maze that actually scared me, which wasn't the monster, it was the exit, because killing the boss doesn't clear this floor. Finding the way out does, and the way out moves, and I just made myself the only person down here without a 40-minute head start. Good thing I don't navigate by maps, I navigate by luck, and luck, it turned out, had left some people on the path for me to save. Here's the thing, nobody warns you about the infinite escape maze. The walls shift, the exits lie, and the smart move at every fork is a coin flip, which is to say it was built, by pure accident, to be the easiest floor of my entire life. I don't guess at forks. Child of Fortune guesses for me, and it's never wrong, so I walk the moving maze like a man strolling to a corner shop he's visited 1,000 times, taking every correct turn on the first try while the walls rearrange themselves around my good mood. And a few turns in, I caught up to my own people. A cluster of humans, maybe 8 of them, pinned down and losing, and at the front of them, holding the line, spending herself to keep the weaker ones behind her alive, was Mei Song, the shy girl, the one I'd told twice to go get strong enough to stand next to me. She'd taken me at my word so hard that here she was, a fresh talent, throwing her light between a monster and a huddle of strangers she didn't know, burning down to nothing to buy them another 10 seconds, fully expecting those to be her last 10 seconds. She hadn't gotten strong enough to stop being scared. She just decided to be brave anyway, which is harder and better, and she'd done it where she thought no one who mattered would ever see. I saw. I came through that fight like weather. Whatever was killing my people stopped killing my people. And when the dust settled and Mei Song looked up, half dead and still standing in front of the ones she'd shielded, and realized it was me, that the person who'd shown up out of the moving dark was the exact person she'd been trying to become worthy of, she did something the shy girl from before could never have done. She grabbed me and kissed me, fierce and terrified and completely certain, in front of everyone, because she'd made peace with dying about a minute earlier and hadn't yet made peace with being alive. I let her. I want to be honest, I've been telling this girl, not yet, get stronger, since the day I came back from the island, and I meant it every time, for her safety. But she just stood between death and 8 strangers, because I once told her that's who I needed her to be. There's a point where, not yet, stops being protection and starts being cowardice of my own. I'm not there. But I stopped pretending I felt nothing, and I held onto her for a second longer than strategy required, and I filed the rest of that conversation for a floor where nobody's actively trying to kill us. She got stronger. She's getting there. We'll finish that talk. Not everyone in that huddle had earned my patience, though, because there'd been one more human on that path, an talent, stronger than anyone Mei Song was protecting, and when the monsters came, he hadn't held a line. He'd grabbed 3 of his own people and put them between himself and the danger as shields and run and left them to die, buying him distance. He was still alive because of it. 3 of ours weren't. I don't kill humans for being weak. Weakness isn't a crime. Half of survival is being honest about what you can't do. But there is a difference, a bright and bottomless one, between a coward who runs and a coward who feeds you to the thing chasing him so his own legs have less to carry. The first one I'll drag to the exit myself. The second one used my people as meat. So I looked up the deserter's name in the handbook so I'd know exactly whose it was, and then I made sure the talent who spent 3 human lives to save his own didn't spend a 4th. The maze got 1 more body. It wasn't one of the 3 he'd sacrificed. That's the only fairness I had to offer them, and I offered it. Then I gathered the living, Mei Song and her 7, shaken and grateful and alive, and I put them behind me, and I did what I apparently do now. I walked a group of humans through an impossible room toward a door only I could find. There was just one thing standing between us and the exit, and it was a wall that had killed everyone who'd tried it. And it was about to teach 5,000 watching monsters a completely false lesson about how my powers work. I was going to lie to the entire tower with a coin and a fireball. Let me show you how. The last thing between 5,000 trapped trial takers and the exit was the Wall of Sighs, and it earned its name honestly. It has 1,000,000 health, and it heals instantly. And here's the trap. Any damage you deal it that falls short of 1,000,000 gets reflected back at you 5 times over, as true damage that ignores every defense and shield you own. Hit it for 200,000 and it hits you back for 1,000,000 and you die. I watched 2 different prodigies try. One walked up confident, hit it hard, and got erased. The second one had triple shields and a 500,000 health emergency scroll and every trump card his rich clan could give him, and the wall peeled through all of it and turned him to ash too. The reflect is true, and it penetrates, and it does not care how clever your defense is. To pass the wall, you have to outdamage 1,000,000 in one shot. Nobody at this stage can do that. I can do that 4 different ways before breakfast, which was exactly the problem. Because 5,000 monsters were watching, and among them were 4 SS rank prodigies, a scheming 7-tailed fox named 8 Shadows, an Asura, a Husha tiger, and one more, who'd already worked out I was the human Tao with 2 clan kill orders on his head, and who were looking for any excuse to believe I was beatable so they could collect the bounty. If I flattened that wall with my real finisher, they'd know exactly what I was, and they'd report it, and the price on my head would climb toward worth a war. I didn't want to show them my strength. I wanted to show them a magic trick that made my strength look like a fluke I was about to run out of. So when the whole crowd begged the mysterious human Tao to save them, I performed reluctance. I let them pile up promises, rewards enough to fund me to the top of the tower, and then I haggled the promises higher, because a man about to spend his last trump card would absolutely haggle. And then I sighed a heavy tragic sigh and told them the sad truth about my one and only nuclear option. I have a skill, I said, that I can use exactly 3 times in my life. I've spent 2. This is the last. And then I summoned, into my open hand, in front of 5,000 held breaths, a coin. Now, the coin is real. Destiny Judgment is a real skill, and it really is a gamble. Flip it, and it's 50-50. Heads, and for 10 minutes my next hit does 10 times damage, enough to make a garbage rank a god. Tails, and instead my next hit takes 10 times damage, and I become a man who couldn't beat an F-rank monster, standing helpless in a crowd that wants me dead. A genuine coin flip, genuinely fatal on the wrong side. The 4 fox schemers felt the tower's own rule power radiating off that coin and went quiet because they could tell it was the real thing, and they started praying I'd win the flip so they could escape, while privately planning to gut me the second the 10 minutes ran out and my one big trick was spent. That was the whole point. Let them think it's one big trick. Let them think there's a timer on me. My luck's always been good, I told them, and I waited. I waited on purpose until the maze's countdown hit exactly 10 minutes, so my god window would cover our whole escape, which also made me look tactically clever instead of impossibly strong. And then I flicked the coin. 5,000 voices prayed for heads. The coin came up white. Of course it came up white. It's a coin flip, and I am the one thing in this tower that coin flips are afraid of. Some fox in the front muttered, "What a ridiculously lucky kid," and he had no idea he just said the truest sentence of the whole floor. And then, instead of my actual finisher, I picked my most ordinary attack, a plain, explosive flame bullet, the little 300 damage starter shot I'd learned in my first hour in the tower, and I fed it through the 10-fold amplification until it swelled into a sun I could barely hold over my head, and I gave it a stupid, deliberate, incendiary name so the name itself would do half my lying for me. "Go," I said. Flame God Fireball. I watched 4 SS rank prodigies flinch at the words Flame God, at the whisper of the ancient god the name points to, and I threw an ant's firecracker dressed up as a deity's wrath straight into the wall of size. 1,705,148. The wall didn't reflect it. You can't reflect what deletes you first. A 1,000,000 health wall that had turned 2 prodigies to ash simply ceased to exist, melted to dust, and the road to the exit opened up clean and clear, and 5,000 trial takers stared at me the way you stare at a thing you've decided not to make angry. And here's the lie inside the truth, the part I'm actually proud of. Every single thing they saw was real. The coin was real. The gamble was real. The fireball's damage was real. But the story those true things told, the human Tao has a rare limited use gamble skill, and he's just burned his last charge, and underneath it, he's a nothing F rank running on fumes. That story was a complete fabrication, assembled out of nothing but facts. They'll report it up the chain. Their bosses will hear that Tao's scary moments come from a one-time trick he's now spent, and the next time I do something impossible, they'll tell themselves I must have found another one-time trick, because the alternative, that a garbage rank simply cannot lose a coin flip, is a truth no proud race will ever let itself believe. People would so much rather call you lucky than admit you're strong. I've turned that into armor. Let them call me lucky. They're even right. They just don't understand what the word costs the person standing across from me. The wall was down, the exit was open, and the 4 foxes at the front, having decided my one big trick was spent, exchanged their little smiles and got ready to murder the harmless F rank. That was a mistake. And it was about to be a very educational one. 8 Shadows ran the play like a chess opening. He'd deduced that my god window boosted my attack but said nothing about my defense, and a scheming fox tests a theory before he bets his life on it. So he had the Asura in the group, a warrior who can switch to a blade you can't dodge, hit me with a surprise close-range strike the instant my back was turned. 120,000 damage, undodgeable, straight into my spine, meant to measure how much armor was under the fireball. The Asura's undodgeable blade hit me for 1 damage. 1. Because the thing they'd never once factored in was the immovable, as a mountain talent I'd taken off a titan 2 floors down, stacked with a dragon's heart's worth of set defense and 80% damage reduction baked into my talents. Their surprise attack test detonated against me like a firework against a cliff, and 4 SS rank prodigies watched their careful little experiment return the one number that ended their whole plan. His best ambush. 1 damage. There is no strategy that survives that reading. If the god window made me a god of offense, they'd gambled everything on my defense being mortal, and I'd just shown them a mountain. They tried anyway because pride is a disease. It went about how you'd expect. I didn't need the coin. I didn't need the fireball. I didn't even need to spend the finisher. I told them I was out of. I just turned around and was better than 4 of the proudest young monsters in the tower at the same time, with my real skills, the ones they'd convinced themselves I didn't have. 8 Shadows, to his credit, read the board a half-second before the others and did the smartest thing a fox can do. He stopped. He knelt. He called it wisdom instead of terror, which is how clever people survive. And because he'd been smart enough to quit, I let him and the ones who copied him live. The ones who kept swinging did not get that option. I've got nothing against surrender. I've got a great deal against people who tried to sell my head to the turtles and only reconsidered once the selling got hard. There was one last test in the maze after the wall. There always is, and I'm not going to dress it up because a moving puzzle room is exactly the kind of thing max luck turns into a formality. I walked it the way I'd walked all of it, 1 correct turn at a time, my 8 humans strung out behind me in the only safe line in a maze that eats 9 of every 10 people it isolates. And we walked out, first, ahead of 5,000 monsters and every SSS prodigy still stuck a floor below. You know the chime by now. SSS rounded up to SSSS by a luck that never stops tipping the scale, and the 3rd floor gave its gift to the whole human race, and this one was enormous. From now on, permanently, every guardian boss on the 3rd floor's maze maps would treat humans as neutral, not hunt them. Every human child who ever enters that maze from this day forward gets to walk past the thing that killed 99% of the people it caught, because a garbage rank one-shot a demon dog in a doorway and refused to leave his people behind a wall. 3 floors, 3 SSSS ratings, 3 gifts to 8 billion strangers who'll never know my name. And the 8 I did lead out got paid too. My rating pulled their ratings up with it. S grades and SS grades for a huddle of survivors who'd expected to die in the dark. One of them was a foul-mouthed, fearless girl named Liu Qing, a sea talent near the bottom of the ladder, who'd cursed the whole maze out the entire way and never once stopped moving, and my clear dragged her all the way up to an SS rating she had no business touching and every ounce of the guts to deserve. She thanked me by calling me a show-off. I decided on the spot that I liked her. The human race is not built out of its SSS prodigies. It's built out of Yuan Xiaomengs, swearing and terrified and refusing to lie down. And every one of them I can drag up a floor with me is a person the clans don't get to grind into a mind slave. That's the whole job, underneath the fireballs. Bring people up the stairs, 3 floors down, 7 to go, and then the battlefield, and then my mother. I gave my 8 their ratings, pointed them home, and turned toward the 4th floor, which turned out not to be a floor at all, but a sea. An endless, drowning, monster black sea, with a storm at the middle of it that no F-rank was ever meant to cross, and a secret hiding in the fog on the far side that had been waiting, specifically, for someone exactly like me. Her name was Rui. But I'm getting ahead of the water. Before the sea, there was paperwork and a reveal and a smear campaign I ordered on myself. First, the fallout from the maze. Killing a coward has consequences, because in the tower, nobody stays dead. The immortal body blessing I'd bought the race means a human who dies just gets ejected and revived at half strength 5 minutes later. So the deserter I'd executed for feeding 3 of ours to a monster came back to life, and so did a rich prodigy I'd killed earlier named Deng Hua, who turned out to be the grandson of a Heavenly King Academy Dean, which is how I acquired a 300-year-old clan swearing revenge on me for a murder the victim survived. Some ungrateful human I'd hauled out of the maze leaked it around to spite me. Liu Qing, my foul-mouthed sea talent, cursed him into the ground on my behalf, which is the exact moment I decided she was family. You learn who your people are by who defends you when it's not convenient. Then I went to see the Fat Man, and the Fat Man's world got a lot bigger. Baofu, my favorite pretend merchant, finally stopped pretending because Yi Yi was standing in his shop when I walked in, comfortable at home, calling him by a family title. Baofu's boss, the person he'd been quietly working for since he emptied a market for me on day 1, was my big brother Ye Fei. The The whole chance meeting with a friendly local tycoon had been Yefei's hand the entire time, cupped under me so I'd never quite hit the ground. I'd suspected, having it confirmed in a tea shop by a princess who turned out to be the boss's own family was still a lot to swallow with $1 million a cup tea. He paid me for the maze, and he overpaid. I'd handed the human command a complete atlas of the third floor's maze, every turn, every trap, and they used it to run something quietly enormous. A memory purge keyed to every graduating human, a mental self-destruct that screens race traitors out of our own ranks forever, closing the exact hole the shadow demon had crawled through. For that I got bumped to human S-class authority, a clearance normally reserved for emperors, the same tier Yi holds. And the human race's #1 smith, an ancient named Uyezi, who forges at 100% success rate, offered to take me on as a closed-door disciple and forge me a free SSSS grade artifact, which, remember my daydream about becoming my own smith. The universe was preloading it, but the thing I actually cared about in that shop was giving Yi her present. I put the Yue plate in her hands, the gradeless sky blue tablet keyed to her class that I'd pulled off the hell demon dog, and I watched it wake up the instant it touched her, because it wasn't just equipment. It was her innate divine artifact, a destiny-bound thing that unsealed the full flood of her jade pool power, her stats blooming past 1200%, 5 special element slots opening at once. I'd carried a princess's destiny out of a maze in my pocket for a month, and I got to be the one who handed it to her. She'd burned her secret to save me on a school stairwell. This was me, quietly, paying it back with the single most valuable thing I'd ever held. She didn't have words for it, neither did I. We're not a words kind of thing. We're I found the one object in the tower that was made for your soul and I brought it to you kind of thing, which is better. The last piece of business before the sea was the smear campaign, and I want to be clear that I was in favor of it. Out in the forums, the myriad races boards, and even our own human ones, a story was spreading that the human Tao kills his own kind, a monster who murders fellow humans for sport, backed by doctored clips of me executing that deserter and that Kong prodigy. Any normal hero would fight the lie. I fed it. I want the races to think I'm an unstable villain who burns his own people, because a villain the humans will disown is a villain the clans stop investing in killing, and every hour they spend believing I'm a self-destructive lunatic is an hour they're not spending on the truth, which is so much worse for them. Let the story say Tao is a treacherous monster. My real people, Wei Zhen, Yi, Mei Song, a foul-mouthed girl named Liu Qing, a lightning kid, a fat merchant, a big brother with a third eye, know exactly what I am. Everyone else's confusion is my armor. I've built my whole survival out of letting people believe the least dangerous version of me. Then Yefei handed me a sealed letter about the 4th floor and told me to go cross a sea that had killed every prodigy who ever tried it, and I went, because that's the direction my mother is. The 4th floor is the boundless sea, and it does not care how strong you are. It cares whether you can cross water. The races that swim, dragons, jiao, serpents, walk it easily. Everyone else gets a boat size to their talent, and my talent is F, so the tower issued me a wooden raft with 100 health and a bedsheet for a sail. 100 health, 1 good wave, and I'm a drowned garbage rank. The nightmare route I'd picked, lone sail, distant shadow, has 3 parts. A windless stretch, a middle where a cluster of god-tier tornadoes runs loose, and a far half drowned in a fog that has killed almost everyone who's ever sailed into it. Solo. On a raft, with 100 health, and then, as I was shoving off, Mei Song jumped onto the raft. Because of course she did. I told this girl to get strong enough to stand next to me, and now she will not be left on a shore while I sail into a nightmare, and I've stopped being able to argue with the exact courage I asked her to grow, so it was 2 of us on a 100 health raft, and I did the only thing a man with maxed luck and a pocket full of fire skills can do with a boat that fragile. I turned it into a rocket. The trick is that a sail doesn't care what pushes it. I pumped my wind skills and my flame boots hellish gale into that bedsheet until the raft stopped sailing and started flying, skipping across the sea like a stone thrown by a god. Somewhere in there, I'm fairly sure the raft developed feelings about its life. It had been a jet boat, then a gliding kun, then, when we hit the tornado cluster and I fired the entire stored charge of the burning silence ring out the back of the sail like an afterburner, a straight-up propulsion rocket screaming across the water on a tail of 900,000 damage flame, while 2 teenagers held on and a wooden raft silently asked the universe what it had done to deserve any of this. I owe that raft an apology and a medal. The tornado cluster is the part that kills the strong ones, a knot of storms big enough to swallow a warship, and no talent, no strength, no clever build gets you through it. You just have to not be where the wind is over and over for miles, and being fast isn't enough because the wind is faster. But I don't dodge by being fast. I dodge by being lucky, Child of Fortune's whole nature is to steer me away from disaster before my eyes even register it's there. So I closed my hands on the flagpole, held Mei Song against my chest, pointed the rocket at gaps my gut swore were there a half-second before they opened, and let a buff shaped like blind faith thread 100 health raft through a field of god-tier tornadoes. We punched into the dead calm eye at the center, a bubble of impossible stillness in the middle of all that screaming, and out the far wall, and skidded down onto the flat, quiet water of the sea's back half the raft gone, both of us alive, the tornadoes behind us, and then it got quiet in the way that means something is watching, because the back half of the boundless sea isn't tornadoes. It's fog, a thick white blindness that stretches for the entire rest of the crossing, hiding undercurrents that erase you and reefs you only find by dying on them and monsters that wait under a surface as smooth as glass. Mei's Song threw her strongest light magic at it to burn it off, the way light is supposed to eat fog, and nothing happened. Nothing at all. Don't bother, I told her. That fog isn't natural. Somebody's making it. Somebody who's been making it, without stopping, for about 500 years. She stared at me, and I told her the ghost story of the 4th floor. The one even our own era master would never confirm out loud, that centuries ago a Zhao clan prodigy so gifted it topped the ranking, an SSSS talent named Rui, sailed into this sea and simply never came out, not died, never came out. And ever since, the back half of the sea has been drowned in a fog that isn't weather, laid over a trick called the mirage, false shorelines, false ships, false safety, all of it steering the hopeful straight into the reefs and the dark. Even Thorin, our own light god, got lost in it once and had to turn back to shore. He's the only person who ever claimed to see Rui's face and live, and he came home with a very strange story and no willingness to explain it. So Rui's still alive down here, I said, into the white, in the fog, waiting for something, for 500 years. Mei Song moved a little closer to me and asked very quietly if we were going to meet the mirage. Don't worry, I said, you've got me. Which was true, and which was about to be tested, because the fog had gone from hiding us to reaching for us, and the first thing it reached for was the inside of our heads. The mirage doesn't just make fake shorelines. Its deepest trick is a thing called inner demon derivation. It reaches into you and builds the thing you want most, or the thing you fear most, and makes you live inside it. And it went for Mei Song first, because she was the softer target, and it found the tender wound every devoted person carries, the fear that it isn't returned. She started talking to a me who wasn't there, pleading with a fog-shaped version of the thing she wants, and I watched her face cycle through hope and dread and the specific misery of a girl who's terrified that she'll always come second, that she'll be left on a shore while someone else gets to stand next to me. I grabbed her and said her name, and she couldn't hear me. She was lost somewhere behind her own eyes, arguing with a ghost about whether she was enough. There's nothing crueler you could build for that particular brave, insecure girl, and the fog built it in about 4 seconds. Then it came for me, and it aimed higher because it had more to work with. It showed me the flood. Jiao Lei's wave, but this time nobody stops it. Jiangnan going under, and my mother's hand slipping out of mine in the black water, and then my mother's face when I found her after. It showed me Yi Yi looking at me with disgust and telling me not to contact her again. It showed me Bao Fu, gentle Bao Fu, personally locking shackles onto my wrists. Every worst thing, rendered in perfect detail, one after another, and I want to be honest, knowing they were fake did not make them stop hurting. My chest still seized, my breath still stopped. That's the horrible genius of it. It doesn't fool your mind, it drowns your heart, and the heart doesn't check ID. So I stopped using my eyes. I closed them, wrapped one arm around a girl trapped in her own worst fear, and steered a rocket raft through a wall of my personal nightmares on nothing but the buff that has never once let me pick the wrong direction. Child of Fortune doesn't care what the fog paints. It just knows which way is out. I trusted it over my own senses, and I sailed blind through every terrible thing I've ever been afraid of, and I came out the other side into a small clear pocket of water, where a voice I did not expect said in surprise, "Eh, little brother, you're actually not affected?" I opened my eyes, and there, floating on the sea, was a creature the size of a child, something between a little dragon and a little snake, tilting its head and looking at me with the most enormous, hopeful eyes I have ever seen on a living thing. Rui, the mirage, the lost SSS prodigy of the Zhao clan, the ghost that had killed 500 years of sailors and stopped an era master. It was a kid. It was, functionally, a lonely kid, and it started talking a mile a minute in a bright childish voice. My language, learned, it explained, from the one-eyed white-bearded human who'd come here long ago, the only person it had ever gotten to talk to, who'd looked at it and been annoyed and left, and it had cried about that for a long time. It told me this while wiping at its eyes, and something in my chest that the fog hadn't managed to break did a slow, painful turn. because here's the story it told me, in the guileless way children tell you the saddest things without knowing they're sad. The Mirage clan is cursed. The faster they grow, the sooner they die, ever since they lost their people's guardian artifact a long, long time ago. Rui's parents died young. Their grandparents died young. Everyone Rui ever loved grew up and died young, one after another, because that's what growing up costs a Mirage. And the broken remnant of the clan got absorbed into the Jiao clan, who didn't care about the curse at all. They just wanted the little prodigy to keep climbing the tower and winning ratings for them, spending lifespan they'd never get back to fatten the clan's name. So Rui ran to this sea, which used to be the Mirage clan's home before the tower ate it, where a scrap of the old guardian artifact's power still lingers in the water. And here, and only here, Rui doesn't age, doesn't grow up, doesn't die. The child I was looking at had been a child for 5 centuries, holding perfectly still in the one place in existence that would let it stay alive, because to grow was to die. It had stopped the whole world at the edge of its own sea and waited alone, in a fog of its own making, for hundreds of years. Waiting for what? For me. Or for the first person who could see through its illusions and walk all the way up to it, because something it called the Tower Spirit, an old grandpa it had never really seen, had told it, long ago, that the only way it would ever get to leave this sea and live was to wait for that one person, the one the fog couldn't fool. And it had believed that and held still and waited out 500 years of solitude on the word of a voice, because when you are a child and everyone you love is already gone, a promise is the only warm thing you have left. The Hyoshin Tower itself had reached down and told a dying child to wait, specifically for someone exactly like me. I don't know what that means yet. It scares me more than the tornadoes did. I got Rui to release Mei's song, one wave of a small hand, and the girl came back to herself, gasping, freed from the fear the fog had wrapped around her heart. And then Rui looked up at me with those enormous eyes and asked the question it had clearly been terrified to ask for 500 years. You won't dislike me, right? I want to come with you. What was I going to say? No? Leave a child in a fog for another 5 centuries because taking it along would be complicated? I've done a lot of cold things in this tower. I draw the line somewhere, and the line is exactly there. There was a catch. Rui was, on paper, a Jiao clan creature, one of the races that hunts us. But Rui solved that faster than I could worry about it. With a thought, it simply gave up being Jiao and asked to join the human race instead, because, it shrugged, it was the last Mirage alive, and no clan had ever done anything for it anyway. A prompt opened in my vision. This creature wishes to become human. Do you accept? I accepted, and a lonely, cursed, 500-year-old child stopped being a weapon the Jiao clan pointed at the tower and became one of ours. A second human SSSS talent, standing beside Yi Yi, appearing exactly when the human race needed her. And I stood there in the clearing fog realizing that 500 years ago, our race got 2 era masters in the same century when the rule says 1, Yuan God and Thorin, both at once, and maybe, just maybe, one of them had done this exact thing. Reached into a sea, or a mine, or a fog, and pulled a wonder out of another clan and called it human. Maybe that's how you cheat the once-a-century rule. You don't wait for the human to be born. You go find the orphan nobody else deserved, and you give them a home. Rui took a huge breath and swallowed the fog. All of it, the whole 500-year blindness of the back half of the sea, gone down a child's throat in one indelicate gulp, and there was the real coastline, clear and close, the far shore of the boundless sea. And Rui gave me a present on the way, the name and, later, the return of the Mirage clan's lost guardian artifact, the Kongtong seal, the thing whose loss had cursed a whole people, an SSS relic handed to me by a kid who was just relieved someone had finally come. There was one last thing in the water that wanted to eat us, and I'll give you 3 guesses what it was. A turtle. Of course it was a turtle. A Fuyue dragon turtle, S-grade, a subrace of the Black Tortoise clan with 113,000 defense, a wall with a shell, the kind of thing that laughs at ordinary damage all day. It smashed my raft to splinters and knocked Mei Song into an undercurrent that would have erased her, and for one bad second, I took a 19,000-point hit to the back, pulling her out of water that ignores armor, and then I got annoyed, and I have told you how I feel about turtles. I hit it with everything my fire conversion combo had, 147,000, 207,000, 307,000, 3 strikes each big enough to kill it, stacked on a creature that had spent 300 years being unkillable in front of a helpless child. Rui watched a thing it had lived beside and feared for centuries come apart in a single breath, and looked at me the way you look at weather that's on your side for once. Then I carried a fainted light mage, walked beside a 500-year-old kid wearing a brand new human soul, and stepped onto the far shore of a sea that kills almost everyone, first of course, and rated SSSS of course, and the fourth floor gave its gift to the whole race. From now on, the monsters of the boundless sea leave humans alone, forever. 4 floors, 4 gifts, 4 SSSS ratings. And this time, I didn't just clear a floor, I came off it with a lost people's relic in my pack and a lonely child holding my sleeve, and the growing, uneasy certainty that the tower itself had been arranging pieces on a board with my name on them since before I ever drew an F rank on a playground. I was starting to think I wasn't climbing the tower. I was starting to think the tower was growing me, and I did not yet know why. But the 5th floor was where I finally stopped being an F rank at all. So let me tell you about the day I made the whole word obsolete. The 5th floor is the fair arena, and it's the one floor built to be genuinely fair. You only ever fight bosses of your own exact talent grade. An SSS prodigy faces one SSS boss, and an F rank like me, if I pick the lowest difficulty, faces one F boss. The catch is that you choose your difficulty once, no backsize, and the harder you pick, the more of them you fight. Every grade up doubles the count. So when the tower asked what difficulty I wanted, and I said SSS, it warned me, twice, that an F rank choosing SSS difficulty would be locked in a sealed arena with 256 F grade bosses at once. Kill them all or die. 256 bosses. I heard 256 free talents, and I nearly proposed to the tower, because here's what the 5th floor is to a normal person, and what it is to me. To a normal F rank, one same grade boss is already a coin flip that usually ends in death, and 256 is a math problem with only one answer. To me, with a defense, 256 F bosses literally could not scratch, dealing a flat -1 against a mountain and a movement speed that let me stroll through their whole army like a man window shopping. It was a petting zoo where every animal was carrying a present. My handbook needed 10 F boss kills to finally advance from F to E, dragging every talent and skill I owned up a grade with it, and every boss I killed handed me its talent. 256 talents on offer, and I got to keep the best ones. Also, and I found this out on the 5th floor, my handbook talks. I'd spent 4 floors thinking the thing was a silent tool, and then I asked it a question out of frustration, and it flipped itself open and wrote me an answer, like a very smug pocket encyclopedia that had been waiting years for me to finally say something to it. My talent has a Siri function. It informed me, a little sniffly, I felt, that once it hit E grade, I could never again collect anything below E, so I'd better choose my last F grade plunders carefully, that same type talents overwrite instead of stacking so I shouldn't grab doubles, and, the part that made me sit up, that every single time it upgraded, it would unlock a brand new entry. 4 floors in, and I hadn't even found the bottom of what this garbage talent could do. I apologized to my book. We're friends now. I named it Baby Handbook. It seems fine with this, so I did it properly, like a shopper with a list. I spent an hour and a half running 256 bosses in circles, flying ones twisting their necks off trying to track me, ground ones running themselves breathless, none of them able to touch the hem of my coat, while Baby Handbook sketched every last one, and I read their talents off the pages. Then I picked my 10, not the flashiest, the ones that fit. 7 with clean dual and triple bonuses I didn't already own. Fire, earth, water, thunder, ice, a rare triple stack off a centipede hiding in the mud, and 2 special ones I wanted badly. A tiger with coercion, an aura that just quietly weakens everyone near me by a flat cut, because weakening the enemy is the same as strengthening yourself, and I'm a relative values kind of guy. And a giant mosquito. Yes, a mosquito. I have a personal grudge against the whole species, and I want that on the record, with blood drinking, lifesteal, which turns every hit I land into health back, which turns me into a machine that cannot be worn down. You break my shield, I steal it back off your face. You hit, I heal, forever. I killed the mosquito first, out of principle. Fireball, 195,000 damage on a creature with 10,000 health. Overkill by a factor of 19 and worth every point. Then the tiger, the centipede, the pig, the rest, 1 clean kill each, 10 in a row, and on the 10th, the chime I'd been climbing toward since a playground laughed at me finally rang. The 10,000 Races Illustrated Handbook has advanced to E rank. I'm not going to be cool about this part, because I wasn't. 4 floors, 1 clawed up mountain at a time, and the letter that had been a death sentence at breakfast on the first day of my life as a hero clicked over, F to E, and dragged everything up with it. Every talent I'd bled for went to E. Every skill went to E. The word that 300 classmates had held a funeral over, the word my mother wears like a countdown, the word a whole species had used to decide I was harmless. That word was now just the rung below me. I looked at a talent panel that no longer said F anywhere on it, and I thought about the schoolyard, and I said quietly, to nobody, the thing they'd all sneered at me a lifetime ago. You call this an F-level talent? It isn't one anymore. I climbed out of the word. On my own, one boss at a time. Watch what it does next. Because advancing unlocked the new entry Baby Handbook had promised, and it was called Peerless, and it did two things. First, it let me pour all my scattered talents into one slot, all those separate bonuses gathered under a single name, a stat line 19 buffs deep, every attack type and resistance up 10%, the enemy weakening aura, the endless lifesteal, all of it stacked into one clean line that read like an SSSS prodigy's birthright on a garbage ranks page. And second, the part that made my hair stand up. For every 10 talents I gather, it derives a brand new power out of their combined nature. 10 talents in, and what it handed back was a judgment, heavenly tilt holy judgment. It ignores all defense, every shield, every armor, every damage reduction, up to and including flat invincibility. There is no wall it does not walk through, and everything it doesn't kill outright walks away, branded with a holy verdict mark, a permanent, unremovable minus 10% to every stat they own, forever, no way to scrub it off. I get to hand out a curse, a real one. The kind that doesn't wash out. I turned around and used it on the 246 bosses still watching me, and the sealed arena went quiet, and the 5th floor gave the human race its gift and gave me my 5th SSSS in a row, and it gave me one more thing, a personal one, a pair of rings, Golden Wind and Jade Dew, a match set that buffs the two people wearing them and debuffs anyone who stands against them. Couple rings. I put Golden Wind on. And I looked at Jade Dew for a long moment, the way you look at a thing you're already picturing on someone else's hand, and I decided, privately, that I knew exactly whose finger it was for, and that when the time came, I'd ask a certain clingy childhood betrothal a question with it. Not yet, but soon. A garbage rank has to have some goals that aren't a tower. I stepped off the 5th floor no longer an F rank in any way that mattered, 5 SSSS ratings deep, carrying a curse and a ring and a talent that had finally, publicly, become something. And the whole time I'd been up there climbing out of my own name, the clans that own us had been in a conference room deciding to end me the moment I came down. They'd built a bomb for a district. Let me tell you what was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. 5 clans, Dragon, Black Tortoise, Fox, Asura, Jiao, had finally agreed I was worth a fortune to kill, and they'd pooled that fortune into a horror the 9-tailed foxes call the 5 Elements Ghost Array. 5 formation stones, each one built by grinding down the soul of a war king, each one costing near half an SSS spirit stone, together strong enough to kill a saint. And they weren't going to aim it just at me. They planted it in Tongcheng, my district, my home, the streets my grandfather is buried under, so that the moment I stepped out of the tower, the array would take me and ferry the entire district along with me. Tens of thousands of humans dying as, in the Dragon Lord's own charming words, a generous gift. Kill the garbage rank, drown a neighborhood, and do it fast before the heavenly eye can look up. Except the heavenly eye was already looking. He'd been looking the whole time. My big brother Ye Fei had counted 15 heavenly king-level assassins slipping into Jiangnan when the clans thought they'd hidden 10. He knew every one of them. He knew the array. He knew where every stone sat. And he did nothing, on purpose, because a man who plays the whole board doesn't swat the hand that reaches for his piece. He lets it reach. The clans thought they were hunting me. They were swimming into a net Ye Fei had been weaving for years, and the array meant to bleed a district was about to bleed something else instead. The fat, complacent, traitor-riddled upper ranks of the human command who'd let 15 enemy war kings walk into a base city unnoticed. He was going fishing. The bait was me. The catch was every rot he'd been waiting for an excuse to cut out. The human race has been safe too long, he told the lean thunder god who serves at his side, the one who fretted about the danger to his own precious daughter Yi Yi being in that same district. They've forgotten what it costs to live in the cracks. Let them remember. And underneath the cold of it, the lean man heard the warmer thing, the thing Ye Fei never quite says out loud, that he was clearing the dust, cutting the dead wood, sweeping the whole board clean, to make room. For us. For the generation coming up behind him. He'll be greater than me, Ye Fei said about a garbage rank he'd forged out of a schoolyard reject, and faster than I was. The era belongs to their young people. Then he sat back down to watch a trap spring on the people who set it, and let me keep climbing, because the best thing he could do to protect me was let the world believe I still needed protecting. I didn't see any of that. I was already going up, and the higher I went, the faster the floors fell, because I'd stopped being a boy learning the tower and started being a thing the tower didn't have an answer for. The 6th floor wanted me to find 7 hidden keys in a monsterless forest, scored on time. For a man whose luck walks him straight to the right rock, that's not a trial. It's a formality. I cleared it in under half an hour. It handed the whole race a permanent time bonus, and it handed me a dragon-blooded pet egg with a very specific grudge, born of the Dragon Clan's cruelty and hatching only on the blood of Dragon Clan prodigies. That's the kind of present that tells you exactly who you're expected to go hunting later. And somewhere far above, in their conference room, the clans finally worked out my secret, not the whole of it, but the shape. A human had been born carrying the maxed, ceiling-shattering luck of an actual ancient god, a god of luck, a destiny bender. The Dragon Lord went cold and quiet and swore to come kill me himself because the Dragon Clan of all clans has a very old, very specific reason to fear a person that luck loves. Then the 7th, 8th, and 9th floors turned out to be one thing wearing 3 faces, a frozen peak, a burning volcano, and a mountain of endless thunder all chained together, cross all 3 to reach the 10th. And on the burning one, at the heart of a floor made of fire, in the last place I ever expected, I met my grandfather. I need to slow down for this part. This is the one I don't make jokes over. The Crimson Flame Volcano is a floor made of a lava lake the size of a country, ringed by peaks you have to run across while it tries to melt you, and I was 2 minutes from crossing it, 2 minutes from safe, when the whole thing went wrong in a way it had never gone wrong in 1,000 years. The central peak, an enormous inverted furnace at the heart of the lake, cracked, and the lava lake didn't boil the way it's supposed to. It rose. The whole sea of fire came up over the ring of peaks. The ground shattered under my feet, and I fell into it. I want to be honest about the moment, because it's a true one. I almost quit. I hung there falling toward a sea of fire with every emergency trick spent, and I thought, just die. Take the free resurrection. Start the floor over. That's the smart play. The only thing that stopped me was pettiness. Dying drops your gear, and I was not about to feed a lava lake the sword song you left me. So I burned my last 2 trump cards, an invincibility scroll, and the fire stored in the burning silence ring, and I clawed for the one calm spot in the whole churning hell, the dead center, where the furnace had been, where all the lava was now being sucked back down into a vortex, and there was a person standing in it, smiling at me. An old man, in the middle of a sea of fire, unbothered, with a crimson crystal in one hand that was drinking a country's worth of lava back into itself. As I fell toward him, a hand made of ice rose up out of the vortex and caught me, gently, the way you catch something you've been waiting a long time to hold, and set me down on solid ground in the one cool place in a floor made of fire. And the old man looked at me with an expression I had seen exactly once before on Song Yu's face when he wept over a bundle of bones, and he said, in a voice like the inside of a warm house, I finally waited for you. I asked if he was human. He didn't answer. He walked over, and he reached out, and he put his hand on my head, an old man's dry, careful hand, and he said, how fast time flies. Lin Tao has grown up so much. Nobody knew that name in a sea of fire. Nobody in the whole tower called me Lin Tao. And I stood there with my whole body locked up, 18 years of never having had one of these, and I could not make the word come out of my mouth. I finally waited for you to come of age, he said. You retrieved the thing I asked your mother to leave in my tomb, didn't you? The shard, the 3rd flame god heart shard, waiting in my grandfather's grave. Placed there by my mother, who'd known, who'd always known, who'd left me a 2-line note and walked up a tower to find my father and never once explained the mountain our family was built on. And I finally understood who was standing in front of me, and my eyes went hot, and I grabbed the old man and held on and got the word out. Grandpa. He made a sound of pure joy, a thin old sound, and he hugged me back, awkward, out of practice, patting my back with a withered hand like he'd been rehearsing it for years, and still didn't quite have it. My grandfather. Lin Heng. A name on a martyr's headstone, holding me in a sea of fire. Grandpa, I said into his shoulder, you didn't die. Tell me you didn't die. Silly child, he said gently. I passed away a very long time ago. This is only a clone I left here. It had one job. It waited for you. I didn't let go. I asked him everything at once, the way you do, and the answers reshaped my whole life in about a minute. He was the one who'd taught Ye Fei, my big brother, the era master, the heavenly eye, 100 years ago, the 3-eyed kid, he called him, who'd shown up on this floor, taken one look at a dead man's clone, and begged so relentlessly to be a disciple that my grandfather gave in. My terrifying, world-running big brother had pestered my dead grandfather into teaching him, and then, the sneak, had never once mentioned it to me. Even in a sea of fire, my family found a way to make me feel like the last one told anything, but he was fading while he talked. The clone had only survived this long by sipping at the last of an ancient fire trapped in the furnace, and now that its one job was done, now that it had held me, it was going out like a lamp running dry. I felt his arm going insubstantial under my hand, and my face broke, and he saw it, and he did the thing grandfathers do. He raised one finger, and a wisp of flame dried the tear at the corner of my eye before it could fall. Don't cry, child. Tears are a sign of weakness. He pressed the crimson crystal into my palm and closed my fingers over it. This is the last seed of the 6 Ding divine fire left in the world. If you mean to take the seat of the flame god, and you will need to reach where you're going, then the 7 heart shards are only the beginning. It's the 4 great heavenly fires that matter. This is one of them. His voice was almost gone. I have so many things to tell you. There isn't time. Keep moving forward. Don't look back. I left other pieces of myself waiting for you on the floors above this one. We'll talk properly. Up there. And when you reach the 10th floor, when it asks you to choose, you must choose the flame. And then my grandfather was gone, mid-sentence, the way my mother had left mid-life, the way everyone in my family apparently exits, with the most important word unfinished and a mystery pressed into my hand. I lunged for the spot where he'd stood and closed my fist on nothing but warm air. One tear made it to the scorched ground and turned to steam. I wiped my face. He was right, and I hate that he was right. Tears are weakness, and I have a tower to climb, and a father to find, and now, apparently, a god's seat to earn on the way. Look forward, don't look back, but I kept the crystal. It still held a little of his warmth. It was the only thing my grandfather ever got to give me, and it turned out he'd been saving it in a sea of fire for 18 years, waiting for the day the grandson he'd never met would grow up enough to come collect it. Then I ate a god's fire, and it hurt like the end of the world. The 6-ding divine fire is one of the 4 great heavenly fires, a flame so absolute the myths say it forged the gods themselves, and even reduced to a single dying seed, it was never meant to fit inside a human body. It went in through the point between my eyebrows and toward my skull, and then poured down every blood vessel I have, cleansing the marrow, refining the constitution, doing to me on the inside what a forge does to raw ore. I smoked. I glowed. I turned the exact red of a boiled shrimp, and my hair, all of it, every last strand, burned clean off in about 1 second, which is how I learned that ascending toward godhood comes with male pattern enlightenment. Bald Tao, the universe gives with the left hand and takes your hairline with the right. But oh, what it gave. 100 points to every single one of my 5 base stats at once. 100 to each, the equivalent of a normal person leveling up 100 times, dropped into me in 1 screaming minute. 1,000 each to my fire attack, my fire resistance, my fire penetration, and an awakening, the melting trait, the first real spark of a fire that isn't mortal, the smith's fire, the fire that pulls the pure thing out of the raw thing. I snapped my fingers and flames stood up on them with no skill behind it. I wasn't a man throwing fire anymore. I was starting to be a man made of it. And when the fire settled, I looked around at the 8th floor of the Haoshan Tower and discovered I had broken it, not cleared it, broken it. The furnace's death and my absorption had leveled every peak, boiled off the whole lava lake, flattened a landscape 1,000 years old into smoking, scorched rock. The tower itself announced it to every race in existence. The 8th floor has suffered irreversible damage due to the human Tao and will be closed for repairs. I didn't just top a floor, I retired one. Somewhere out in the boundless sea, a dragon prince named Ember 7, the number 2 name on the whole ranking, heard that announcement and flinched so hard, a tornado ate him. That's my favorite detail. I ruined a god's furnace and a dragon lost a fight to the weather out of sheer secondhand stress. The floor gave me my 8th SSSS on the way out, and the reward was the last piece I needed, Samadhi True Fire, the divine flame that grows inside anyone who's touched the 6-ding, and out of it 3 gifts, a fire body that multiplies my flame more than 5 times over, a fire ring to throw a crowd off me, and the one that mattered most, Fire Eyes of Truth, the signature technique of a long-ago era master called the Fighting Saint, eyes that see through every disguise, every transformation, every invisibility the tower allows. The clans have spent this whole climb sending me things that wear other faces. Mirror wore faces, the Shadow Demon wore people. There are traitors in my own race hiding behind human skin right now, waiting in the dark for the day I walk out of this tower, and I just woke up with a pair of eyes that no liar can hide from. They picked a bad century to send me assassins in masks. So, let me tell you where the garbage rank actually stands, now that I've climbed 8 floors and stopped being able to look back. A schoolyard laughed at me over a letter. That letter is 2 grades behind me now, and I burned past it myself, 1 boss at a time, on the strength of the worst talent in the building. I've bought 8 billion strangers their lives more times than they'll ever know. I buried the best man I ever met and carry his sword and his last technique. I took a god clan's mine and made their proudest family bleed. I walked a lost people's child out of a 500-year fog and gave her a home and a name. I ate my dead grandfather's fire out of a sea of flame, and he told me, before he went, that the road ahead runs through the seat of a god. And every step of it is the same step, the only one I've ever really taken. My mother is up there, past the 10th floor, on a battlefield I can only reach by climbing. My father is up there, missing 18 years. My grandfather's other faces are waiting on the floors above, promising we'll finish the conversation the fire cut short. I am not climbing this tower for a rating or a throne or a god's chair. I'm climbing it because my whole scattered family is at the top of it, and the only way back to them is up, through the dragons and the turtles and the traitors and whatever the 10th floor is about to ask me to choose. Good. Let them all wait for me up there. I've got a princess I owe a ring, a lonely kid holding my sleeve, a lightning brother, a loyal fat merchant, a soul mage nobody knows I own, a best friend who moved into my empty house so I wouldn't grieve alone, and a mother somewhere above the clouds who once leaned over in the middle of the worst moment of my life and told me I look better when I smile. I'm smiling now, big brother. I'm coming up. 2 floors stood between me and the 10th. A mountain of endless thunder, and then the door my grandfather told me to knock on, the one where he'd said choose the flame and run out of time before he could finish the word. I had a feeling the 10th floor was going to finish it for him, in a tomb, in front of a dead god who somehow knew my family's name. Let me tell you how the climb ended, for now. The 9th floor was a mountain of endless thunder, and it welcomed me with a disaster it had never handed anyone at once. A double storm, a whirlwind, and a thunderfall together, because I'd become the kind of target both of them wanted, so I took both. I rode the whirlwind down to its heart and pulled out the wind-gathering bead, and then I wore the shape of an old friend, the Icefire Demon Owl, my first floor 2 mount, one of the creatures my illusion transformation had catalogued, to fly up into the thunderfall and seize the thunder-containing bead, 2 halves of a storm that combine into something SSS. I leveled the 9th floor too, 9th SSSS in a row, and I set aside the wind thunder inheritance it dropped, because there's a lightning kid who calls me big brother who's going to look magnificent wielding it someday. The 7th, 8th, and 9th floors buckled together into one broken mountain behind me, and the races gave me 2 new names I'm quite fond of: Fastest Man in History and Map Editor. I keep editing their maps by deleting them, and the best part of that stretch wasn't mine, it was watching my people climb behind me. Rui, my 500-year-old kid, out in the world at last, cleared the 5th floor with an SSS. Mei Song cleared the 5th floor SSS too, recklessly, 4 bosses at once, and I scolded her for it, and she just glowed, because me being scared for her is the same as me caring about her, and she knows it. And then she saved me a wind god cloak off her own clear, the exact wind gear I needed, and handed it to me like it was nothing. They're not behind me anymore. They're climbing. That's the whole point of dragging people up the stairs. Eventually, they start dragging you. Then I reached the 10th floor, and the 10th floor asked me to choose. The 10th is the Awakening Secret Realm. You pick one special attribute to awaken, and the harder the realm you clear, the mightier the gift. My grandfather had run out of breath telling me to choose the flame. So I chose fire at the highest difficulty, and the realm it built me had a name that stopped my heart, the Flame God Tomb. Because a Flame God's tomb is exactly where a Flame God's 7 scattered heart shards would be, and I was carrying 3 of them, and I walked into a dead god's grave to go collect the rest. I'm going to be quick about the climb through the tomb, because it was a furnace grind of fire slaves and fire armies and shopping for a flame god's old wardrobe, and you don't need the inventory. What you need is the archway bosses, because they were not monsters, they were a family. The flame god, Yanli, the Red Emperor, Rui, whatever name you know him by, had been dead for ages, and before he died, he'd summoned his own household into this tomb through the tower to guard the road to his bones and test whoever came for his inheritance. His general Guanzhao, holding a blade forged from a slain sun god's corpse, his brother Hu Fei, and his eldest son, Long Yin, a gentle prince who'd never once competed for anything, who loved only his zither and the company of birds, who'd answered his dead father's call anyway, and then, to slow the drain on his own life while he waited century after century in the dark, had turned himself into a stone statue that couldn't so much as play a single note. They all knew what they were. They were bait and grindstones, summoned to sharpen an heir, and they'd said yes, and they'd waited in a tomb for a stranger to come put them down. I fought them, and I won, because winning is what I do. But the eldest son's brother, Hu Fei, threw the worst thing at me, a technique called Huo Rui burns the heavens, a wall of a god's own fire that I could not survive by being strong. So I did the most desperate thing in my kit. I split my own soul and poured it into the seed of the 6-ding divine fire my grandfather had left me, hid inside the god flame like a cicada shedding its shell, and let the fire take me instead of the attack. It should have killed me. Instead, the 6-ding divine fire, the one that was never supposed to fit inside a human, accepted my soul and became my own, my natal divine fire, mine down to the root, and I came out the other side reborn, body soft and new, another 100 points on every stat, made a little more out of fire than I'd been going in. I keep dying a little on the way up this tower and coming back as something the tower has fewer answers for, and Hu Fei, watching me fuse a god's fire into my soul, was relieved. That's the part that got me. He hadn't been trying to kill me. He'd been trying to force me to survive, to scare the sixth ding awake so it would protect me, and when he saw it light up in me, a dead god's brother went to his rest happy and left an apology behind for the fright. The last guardian was the god's own mount, a crimson flame golden lion, an SSSS beast of true fire. 9 days and 9 nights it had once taken the flame god himself to subdue it. It turned its whole power into a stairway of fire for me to climb. I met it with 100 stacked marks and 1 starfire undying, 53 million damage, and it went out in a single breath, and even that I'd learn was a gift. It had made itself into my final stair on purpose, so a stranger could walk up to its master. Then I reached the top of the stairs, and the flame god was waiting for me, and he turned out to know exactly who I was. He was a skeleton on a throne, all that's left of a fallen god of fire, and he laughed when he saw what I'd brought him. Those 3 heart shards I'd been so proud of, the ones from a newbie pack in an island and a grave, scraps. Less than 1% of his power each, the crumbs the real gods sneered at while they went to war over the big pieces. I'd built my whole climb on garbage the mighty threw away, and then he asked me a question that rearranged everything. How powerful, he said. Is Starfire undying? Very, I told him. It's still my strongest trump. It has been since the first hour. Of course it is, he said. It's how I became a god. Starfire Undying isn't a skill I found in a shard. It's the flame god's own soul technique, the divine skill he built his throne on, and he didn't build it out of fire, he built it out of people. A god who'd spent his early ages looking down on mortals the way gods do, until he was enfiefed over a mountain and had to watch, up close, generation after generation of ordinary people get shoved to the brink of extinction by disaster and cruelty, and each other, and rise again anyway, every time, as long as one of them was still breathing. A single spark can start a prairie fire. The power of all living beings, he called it, indestructible, irreplaceable. He'd comprehended his greatest skill out of the stubbornness of common people who refused to stay dead. And when the other gods came to carve up his corpse, he hid that skill, the real treasure, the heart of him, inside the smallest, most worthless scraps of his power, the ones the proud would never stoop to pick up, a spark, planted in the dirt, left for some future, nobody lifted up by the masses to find and turn back into a fire. I want you to understand what that meant, standing there. The skill that carried a laughed at F rank off a playground, up 10 floors, past dragons and turtles and a sea and a god's tomb, the one power that never failed me, was a dead god's deliberate gift to exactly the kind of person I am. Not a prodigy, not a chosen bloodline, a garbage rank who bought 8 billion strangers their lives and got carried up a tower on their gratitude. The flame god had been fishing across the centuries for someone the common people would raise up, and the net finally closed on me. Our whole race is that skill, clawed to the edge of extinction over and over, and never once finished, because as long as one of us is left there's a spark, and a spark is all it takes. He offered me his throne, the flame dominator class, his own divine seat. And I turned it down, because my own path is stronger now, and I won't trade the thing I built for a crown I inherited. He laughed at that too, delighted, and called me a waste of a divine position, the highest compliment a god has ever paid me. But it didn't matter that I refused the throne, because I already carried his soul skill and 3 pieces of his heart, which made me, in the only way that counts, his true heir, his child, he said. So he gave me the 2 big shards he'd been guarding, 5 of 7, now, and his whole household gave me their parting gifts through his hand. Guanzhou's blessing on the sun-forged blade I'd taken, Wu Fei's skill and his apology, and Longyin's zither, the gentle son's only treasure, the one he'd turn to stone rather than leave, with one request: give it to someone who truly loves music. I know exactly who. I've been carrying gifts to the people I love this whole climb. One more won't break me. And then the flame god told me who holds the other half of his spear, and the last mystery of the whole climb finally cracked open. You remember the traitor. 300 years ago, the century with no era master, the human who should have been our shield and betrayed us instead, the wound our whole race is built around not talking about, the file a fat merchant let me peek at on day 1 to keep me hungry. I've been carrying that mystery since the market, and here, in a god's tomb, I found the end of it. The other half of the flame god's spear became a sword called Chixiao, and the man who found it, 300 years ago, was an ordinary, talented, extraordinarily lucky human who used it to end a chaotic age and gather a shattered humanity back into something that could survive, who called himself the Red Emperor's son, and founded a dynasty our people still remember, and stood as humanity's greatest protector in a century when we had no era master at all. That's the traitor. That's the man our records spit on. A human ancestor who held us together with a god's broken spear when there was no one else to do it. I don't know yet why they call him a traitor. I don't know what he really did, or what it cost, or who decided to write him out of the story as a villain. But I know now that the mystery I've been chasing isn't about a monster. It's about family, my races, and maybe, the deeper I dig, my own. Everyone at the top of this tower keeps turning out to be someone's grandfather. So, that's where the climb has brought the garbage rank they laughed at on a playground 18 years and one whole life ago. I drew the worst talent in the building, in front of everyone, and I climbed out of the word one boss at a time until a dead god called me his heir. I bought a species its survival so many times over that its own dead gods went fishing for me. I buried a legend and carry his sword. I ate my grandfather's fire out of a sea of flame. I hold 5 pieces of a god's heart and a lonely child's hand and a princess's ring I haven't given her yet. And every step of it, all 10 floors of it, was only ever the same step, up. Toward a battlefield above the 10th floor, where my father's been missing for 18 years. Toward a mother who walked out with a 2-line note to go find him. Toward a traitor ancestor who might not be a traitor. And 4 heavenly fires and a god's seat I'll take on my own terms or not at all. The clans that own us have a price on my head and a personal vow from a dragon lord and a shelf full of masked assassins waiting for me to come down. Let them wait. I've got a dead god's spark in my chest, and it's the one fire in this whole tower that the mighty were never able to stamp out because it isn't mine. It's everyone's. It's what's left when a laughed-at, thrown-away, garbage-rank people refuse one more time to lie down and die. You call this an F-level talent? I'm most of the way up now. My family's at the top, and a single spark is all it ever takes. Watch me start the fire.